My name is Richard Furrow, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glow Cloud team.
Welcome, everyone. Today we are here for a very important topic. Why there is such a shortage of cloud skills, and yet most people can't get their first cloud jobs. And it's honestly not a new problem, but it's a critical problem affecting a lot of people. Now, most people, what they think employers need is very different than what actually employers do need. So today, me, the CEO of Go Cloud Careers, Mark, our Chief Technology Officer, and Alonzo Coleman, is our Chief Marketing Officer, who's also got a big background in interviewing people. We're going to talk about what employers need versus what people think they need, which is really what keeps people from getting hired. If you've got the skills, there is such demand for skills, you can get a job in any economy. I've been hired during economy freezes. I've survived over 20 layoffs at the company that I've worked for. But you've got to have what the employers are looking for, and they're looking for a very unique set of skills. And if you have them, you'll get any job you want. But if you don't, you'll struggle. So we're going to talk about expectations, for example, of what employers want versus what people think they want. We'll talk about why certain skills that people think are important are really no longer valuable in today's market and what the real valuable skills are. And we'll talk about why you need excellent preparation. So let's talk about that. And I hope we have a good session today. So before we begin, I want to tell you about a couple of things. On Thursday, we have our How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. And we will go over the architect role. We will go over exactly what employers are looking for these roles and every skill you need to get hired. And that's completely free. I also want to tell you that we have a completely free Azure Solutions Architect Expert Bootcamp coming up. It'll be a 2-week bootcamp. It'll be completely live and completely free. We will go over the tech fundamentals, and then after that, we will talk about the architectural considerations, and we are really looking forward to that. So it's free, so go join us. It's going to be 2 weeks of live training, and we'll give you a lot more in that training than just enough to pass the exam, because passing these exams is one thing, and actually having knowledge is another one. And then we will also talk about that cloud architect guide. We've got a guide in our chat box of how to get your first cloud architect job. And in the description of this video, we've got lots of things for your first AI architect job, enterprise architect job, and so many things to help you. And it's all free. So welcome, everyone. So what caused me to make this, have us have this discussion, I can tell you, was a couple of things that I've seen very recently. And the first one was a question on a YouTube video of ours. And it was a very nice, very well-meaning person. I had about a 30-minute video on intro to networking, and the person asked, is this video enough of networking for a cloud engineer? And the reality is, if you're dealing with a cloud engineer that's $130,000 a year position, you need to have some knowledge. If you're dealing with a cloud architect that's a $200,000 position, you need to have a lot more knowledge, but different knowledge and a different set of skills. And unfortunately, watching a 1-hour video, a 2-hour video, or even a 10-hour video is just not enough. Now, I was very kind to this person. I sent them a BGP workshop, which Mark and I did, which was about 8 hours. I sent them about a 6-hour subnetting workshop, an entire CCNA program, completely free, and the AWS Advanced Networking. And that's kind of the intro-level networking that you need for the cloud engineer role. Right? So, it's expectations of employers. Now, there's also a lot of troubling messages that I'm seeing on YouTube and LinkedIn. Every day, people go to the internet and they convince me not to hire them. And LinkedIn is one of the most valuable tools in the world. I mean, it is incredible. You put the right message out there, you literally get hundreds of recruiters reaching out to you. I mean, every LinkedIn post I have, I get a recruiter trying to reach out to me to hire me. But if I make the wrong content, I'll get crickets and I'll hear. Now, I'm not looking to be hired. I love what I do. I love training people. I've trained people that now work at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft and Accenture and Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, you name it, everywhere. And I love that. But it's about being what someone wants. If you've got a product and it's easy to sell, people will buy it. And unfortunately, we are the product. So it's all about refining our product and refining our marketing message to get any job we want, the same way a company would. And good news, when we talk about that, we've got Alonzo, who's a marketing expert with 30 years of marketing experience. Of course, he also holds an MBA like me and comes from an executive perspective. So those are the things we're going to talk about. So I'll talk about one or two of the messages that kicked it off for me. And then after that, we'll get into the concept. And it's showing what people think employers need is the exact opposite of what employers are actually looking for. So let me give you one of the first ones that I actually saw. And because it really, when I saw it, it was kind of hard to actually look at. So one of them was this video. It was this one. And this is a well-meaning person that's really trying hard to reach out to the community and say things. But what are they actually showing, and what is the message they're actually talking about? So here's the first one. And I understand this. Tyrone, if you can share this message. And this is a message that for someone that's been looking for a cloud engineering job for about a week. And he made the message, apply to jobs, get rejected. A recruiter reaches out, you're not a good fit. Apply to jobs, get rejected. Recruiter reaches out. Now the interview, one or two, then there's a hiring freeze, apply to jobs, get rejected. Recruiter reaches out, hiring freeze before the first phone interview, apply to jobs and get rejection. Does this sound familiar? Now this should be absolutely terrifying. And here's the reason why. When I'm an employer, I don't have very limited time. I don't have time to interview a ton of people. So I'm going to limit my time to interviewing the people that I think are the best and brightest. If a person posts a message that I keep getting rejected, it's telling me not to waste my time interviewing them because the person doesn't have the skill. This should be terrifying. And yet most people do these things and they don't understand the brand perception of what I'm bringing out there. Here's another one that I think is really important to show you. Now, this is a person that's trying to apply, that wants to be a cloud engineer. And I recommend architecture careers over engineering careers, but it doesn't really matter. We still need to understand. Tyrone, if you can share this. Here's another person that got late. They were able to get hired in around 2020 when everybody moved to the cloud, and they were basically hiring people with no skills as long as they had a certification. And here's the person who's not employable, who's been looking for a job for well over a year, creating a message. You don't need to know all the services. You just need to know the basics. A virtual machine, object storage, the cloud providers' databases, serverless compute functions, and container orchestration and some monitoring tools. Well, guess what? There's no storage for the virtual machines listed on the skill. Only object storage. Now, there's no file storage, which we deal with every single day. Now, this is there's most of the databases we use are not going to be the cloud providers' databases because 98% of customers are multi-cloud. So for database knowledge, it's going to be relational databases and NoSQL databases. It's going to be more likely MySQL or Postgres or Oracle DB or Microsoft SQL than the cloud provider's database. And if it's a non-relational database, like a NoSQL database, it's going to be MongoDB or Apache Cassandra. And that's why you can even say AWS getting rid of their database certification, because you can't use a proprietary database in a world where 98% of customers are multiple cloud. Now, what does this list not include that cloud engineers need? Well, pretty much everything. I need my cloud engineers to be able to administer systems, right? So I need Linux skills. I would say the Red Hat certified engineer is the minimum Linux skills that I would ever take in a cloud engineer, that level or of equivalent. I also need networking skills, which are somewhere between the CCNA and CCNP. Now, a cloud engineer, I need good Python skills. Again, not on this list. Cloud engineer, I need infrastructure as code, which pretty much means Terraform because 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. None of that's on this list, but this is what that person's been focusing on. Can I hire this person? No. And guess what? He just showed employers that that's what he thinks employers need. Can't hire this person. And the person just proved it to me. So, I really want you to see this and put it in context. Now, here's something that I really want you to think about. Does anybody think that work has no stress? That we just go and every day we're sitting there and a cat's sitting on our lap and we're petting the cat or your favorite golden retriever, and sunshine and rainbows come in, and in tech, everything always works the first time, and life's really great, and nothing ever breaks, and there's no stress, there's no short timelines. Well, no. So, it's just not reality of our world. And here's something I saw from someone that was talking about data analysts and how to be a data analyst. Now, this, again, was pretty terrifying to me because it's showing the person that they don't understand. Tyrone, if you can explain this. For a data analyst, I expect them to be darn good at SQL. So here's a person that's saying that interviews are unfair because they actually make you code or do some SQL things on an interview if you're applying for a job where all you're going to do is SQL stuff all day. And they said that, you're not going to be doing things under the clock. Well, yeah, you will. You're going to be doing it under pressure. Absolutely, especially when things break. And but someone won't be over your shoulder. Sure, they will when things get break and there's high value things and millions of dollars are being lost. Yes, someone will be over your shoulder. And you can't just research everything and Google everything. You need to know something. Imagine a doctor, you walked into their office and they said, "Excuse me, I got to go to Google." Well, I mean, you could do that yourself, but it's the knowledge, it's the sophistication, it's the things that you can do. So I want you to think about that. And that's why we're bringing these up. I get 50 of these that I see every single day, every day, all day. And it's kind of there. So we think about what employers need. Actually, I'm going to show you one more. And then we'll actually get into the conversation. And this is what spurred this discussion. So Tyrone, I'm going to do this. I want to make sure I get the right one. So this is Tyrone, if you can share this. I hope I shared the right one. So here we go. Here's a person saying my confidence was completely shot. I can't keep doing this every day. Not in this market, but I have to try anyway because we have to eat, pay bills. Yes. So there's the pressure. I can't take a break. Yeah, there's something here. I don't have the luxury. This market is different for employers. Before 2020, it was 2 interviews for to get hired. Why is this crumbling market structure around the mega monopolies who define the entire world economy? The organization you work for collapse. So here's the thing. Guess what? You automatically posted this to the biggest employers that said, "Don't hire me." Why are monopolies doing things? But it's more, and they're going to be the biggest employers. So you just offended the biggest employers. Why could somebody get hired in 2020 and not know anything? Because everybody was on the data center. It was really hard to manage the data center. And in 2020, they just hired anybody. They could pass the certification exam because most people didn't know cloud computing. The cloud skills gap is just as great now as it was before. If not, it's even worse. So they hired people, they couldn't do the job, and they laid them off. And that's what's going on because they needed people so desperately. Now, how many interviews was it for me when I was at Cisco to get promoted to a new job? 16. I traveled to 6 countries on interviews when I already worked at the company to get a promotion. 6 interviews, 8 interviews, 10 interviews. That's great. And here's the reason why. When a company interviews you and they have a lot of people interview you and they give you an offer, first, it discourages all the people that don't want to do that many interviews. They go away. So now you're there. Secondly, they've vetted you in a sophisticated manner and they're going to be the least likely to lay you off because they know what you can do and you won't be terminated. So be grateful for tough interviews. Most of the competition just runs away. It's hard. It's too much. I go. And that means if you've got the grit, if you've got the stamina to survive, you'll get hired. So, Mark, I'm going to ask you some questions. Have you done a lot of networking?
Oops. Can you all still hear me?
We can hear you, Mark.
Okay, it just dropped out. Could you repeat your questions, please?
Mark, have you done interviews of networking professionals in your life?
I've done quite a few myself, yes.
Here's the question. So let's say you're trying to interview a network engineer. Working on the assumption they need to understand an interior gateway protocol such as OSPF, they need to have good knowledge of BGP, they need to be able to create an IP addressing plan for an enterprise. They need to be able to lock down the systems. They need to understand quality of service and other metrics. How hard is it for you to find somebody that can do that really understands it?
Pretty much impossible. And one of the main reasons for that is we're talking about a holistic system, interoperability between different technologies. And it really takes a studious mind that goes out there and tries to understand how these things fit together, not just from a conceptual level, but also in its use cases. And that's where I find there, generally speaking, a lot of network engineers that kind of fall off the bridge. You can find some that are going to be good at BGP, others are going to be good at OSPF, but how all of it fits together in making the system work, that's generally speaking where you have a lot of trouble, especially when it comes to, I don't like using this term, but I'm going to use it right now, entry level, meaning those that have a bit less experience and training behind them, they generally fall off the bandwagon there because they don't understand that we're really going beyond this strategic type of approach that we see that is being taught on certifications.
Yeah. So very easy to find a CCNA, but how many percentages of those CCNAs actually know something other than going and buying a practice exam that was a copy of the actual exam, taking the exam, passing it, and then you ask them to explain the various types of NAT, for example, and they can't explain it to you. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, it's generally the use case. I was pretty fair when I had resumes in front of me, especially when we did like a panel interview. I wanted to focus on what was on the resume and have more of a conversational type of
perfect
interview. I generally never cared about somebody giving me the minutia fact of things because, number one, you're going to look those up if you do need them, but understanding that they are available and under what circumstances we would use them, that is where the importance comes in. If you're just telling me that, okay, I use network address translation to do a translation on the edge device, well, okay, everybody's going to tell me that.
Yes.
Give me an extra example of under what circumstances would this be applicable? And then, for example, something right under the being applicable, and then something simple. And again, this is just to gauge somebody's competency. You could ask them, what if we do have a wide area network connection? And what if we do have an internet connection? How does network address translation, gets implemented and designed around those two type of wide connections? And then see what the person says. And you can slowly get an understanding of what their thinking is. You also see some of those soft skills coming through where people have critical thinking, creativity. And it's not to trap them, but it's you're learning about the people. You're getting to know their character. I don't need an encyclopedia, but I do need somebody who has good critical thinking ability and thinks beyond just the bits and the bytes of the technology.
Yeah, and that's another thing. And, I'm going to introduce this and I'm going to show this in a second. But I need someone that can do analysis. I don't need someone that's got basic configuration commands to configure a router, or the ability to click a bunch of boxes on a management console on the AWS cloud or the Azure cloud. I don't need them. And I'll show you why I don't need them in a minute. I need someone that knows, well, given our architectural constraints on this network, I'm going to choose OSPF versus EIGRP versus IS-IS. Or given our constraints and what we're looking to do in these number of clouds, I've got a write-heavy NoSQL database, and Apache Cassandra writes on all nodes. So therefore, Apache Cassandra might be my best NoSQL database across my 3 clouds. Or, anything where there's an analysis involved. I don't need somebody to click, 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 click. I can train a 6-year-old to do it, quite frankly, and I've done it. But I'm not going to pay a 6-year-old $150,000 to click boxes. And the reality is I don't need anybody to click boxes on any management console anymore. I'm going to use infrastructure as code. And I don't need someone that can just go to Git and pull somebody else's code and kind of tinker with it. I don't need that. I need someone that can look at code. If I'm going to deal with an engineer, with my architects, we're not going to code. I'm going to have somebody that needs to look at it, understand how to performance in it. And here's the reason why. And I'll make this very clear why I don't need those intro-level people anymore. But I need people with skills. So here's an example of what people used to do. I used to have somebody that I would have, rack and stack the servers in the rack. Well, half of those jobs are gone because the cloud computing, they already rack their own servers. Then I needed somebody who could create a virtual machine. Understand how to install the virtual machine. If it's on the cloud like AWS, Azure, or Google, I click one button and it's up and it's running. Now, in my data center, I'm going to make an image of my virtual machine on, say, VMware Nutanix. I'm going to do the same single button click. Now, I don't need it anymore. It's just not a relevant skill. I need people that understand. And here's the difference why I need understanding. Tyrone, I'm going to share a window in a second. This is the reality for today's job seekers. Tyrone, share this window, please. And in this particular environment, let me kind of shrink it down. I'm going to show you why the skills of yesterday are no longer relevant for today. So in this particular environment, I think I made it too big. So let me make it a little smaller so you can see it. Here we go. So let's say I wanted to deploy 1,000 virtual machines in AWS. Now, when I started, we had 1,000 systems. We'd hire 50 admins, and they'd be busy for the next 6 months. But I don't need that anymore. Create a Terraform script to launch 1,000 virtual machine. I'll call it EC2 instances with 16 cores and 64 GB DRAM with 1 TB EBS volume with 3,000 IOPS. And if you look at this, in about 30 seconds, and this is ChatGPT. If I was going to use coding, I would use something like Claude 3.5. ChatGPT seems to be a little better at content creation. Claude 3.5 is a little better at this. So here you go. It's already written my script for me. So do I need somebody to go click those boxes like in a cloud practitioner or a solutions architect associate? No, not at all. I don't need that level of hands-on. Now, I do need a superstar engineer that can look at this and can tune this. And in a matter of 5 minutes, deploy 1,000 of these things. Because they looked at it, they tune it, and they're done. That's the analysis piece. I do need somebody that's going to go look at these things and say, we can tune it here or here, but that's knowledge of how it works, which is different than how to do it. So kind of think about this. So let's say I wanted to automate something. Create a bash shell script. What might I want to? Mark, you're closer to engineering. What I might want to do on Linux, where I write a bash shell script, because I haven't played with Linux since my engineering days.
I have not played with Linux at all. That gives you how much I do networking, no Linux. I know that sounds like a blasphemy for some, that just in the open source community, using free range routing and things like that. But I just do very simple things.
So let me do this. I asked it to create a bash shell script to update the operating system and install an Apache web server. Here you go. Done. So again, this is why when someone says, look, it creates a 15-page document. Look, I know how to install Linux on an Apache web server. I'm like, why? I mean, this is it. This is the reality of the world. So what we're dealing with. So all this Python scripting, all this bash shell scripting, I don't even need a person anymore to do it. I need a person that can understand it, that can work with it, that can tune it. I need somebody that can look at the system and say, the page file is too active on the system, and therefore we need to update the DRAM, because they understand what the swap file or the page file is doing, and they understand that's impact on performance. I also need somebody that could say, for this application on this server, it's going to be very busy. And a lot of the content's going to be frequent. So maybe we need a server that's got a lot of level 1 cache, level 2 level cache, and level 3 cache on the CPU. I also might need someone to say, in this machine learning environment, I'm going to need a lot of GPUs. And I need something that has this many PCIe lanes in order to support all these various GPUs. So what I need is the smarts. I need the analysis. I need the tuning. I need the deep understanding of how it works. And unfortunately, in today's certifications world, they don't teach how it works, only how to configure it, and they don't teach you the underlying technology. It's not like the CCIE, which I call my intro to networking. To pass that exam, you needed to understand networking technology, because everything they asked you to do was something ridiculous. So you had to have really strong fundamentals. Now, was the CCIE reality in real world? No. But what they actually did was ask you to tune everything, so you had to know it, and you had to be able to performance tune it and understand how it works. That's why the CCIE is my favorite intro level to networking exam. And I'll tell you how I did my networking certifications. I did an MCSC, which did nothing for me, honestly. I learned more, but that's neither here nor there. I did a CCNA, a CCDA, a CCNP, a CCDP in about 2 to 3 months. And it was hard. And basically employers said, you still don't have the skills. And then I started prepping for my CCIE. Within 9 months, I passed it. And that was my intro to networking. And then I got to spend the next 25 years learning. But I don't need somebody to pass the CCIE as a network engineer. but I need them to know almost as much as the average CCIE to be hireable. Gone are the days where this, because do we do infrastructure and code and routers? Sure we do. Can we push to APIs? Sure we can. So now all that inter-level, junior level stuff is no longer needed. So in today's world, and in the world with AI, when I hire for skills. I don't care about someone's experience. It's meaningless to me because I've met people with 20 years experience that are terrible, and I've met people with no experience that are awesome. So we'll talk about this. Maybe we'll talk about how do you get these skills, but you're going to need good training. And I can tell you my training was expensive, but it was good. You just need good training. You can't learn to fly an airplane on a flight simulator. You need to actually learn how to fly the plane. You can't become a doctor by watching YouTube videos. Believe me, when I used to practice medicine, and I still do occasionally as a volunteer, someone comes to my office and they're like, you need to treat me for this condition. And I said, well, I need to find out what's wrong with you. I know what's wrong with me. I saw a YouTube video and I'm like, okay, well, I went to school for 7 years for this and spent most of my life learning this. So let's actually find your real problem. And 90% of the time they were wrong. And these were smart people. These were people that were engineers. They were people that would be airplane pilots. These were people that were attorneys. They thought they could be a doctor without going to medical school or going to become a nurse practitioner or a PA. But they didn't know what they didn't know. So we'll talk about what those skills are. Now, Alonzo, it looks like your video is fading. Are you here, Alonzo, or did your Comcast ISP go out in another thunderstorm?
No, we're good to go. No weather so far, but Xfinity could do a little better with their performance. But I am here and ready to answer questions, Mike.
So I'll tell you what I value. I value someone that can come into the team. I value, and I'm gonna ask you some direct things very soon. I value someone that I can trust. I may go away for my birthday for the next 2 weeks. And if I go away for my birthday for the next 2 weeks, I don't want to be up and wondering, are my students going to be okay? Is the company, what's going to happen to the company when I'm gone? Are Mark and Alonzo going to kill each other? I know they won't, but I don't want to have to worry about that. So I look for a lot of things. One is they're friendly. Here's the next thing that I see on YouTube, on LinkedIn every day, which convinces people not to hire you. They take a position on a war. They take a position on a political spectrum. They take a position on something. Here's my problem. What's right to you is based upon your vantage point. The experiences you've had shapes us. Can I build a good team, a real team that knows something by hiring all of the same people? No. Mark is a hardcore engineer, and he's also an architect. Alonzo is an architect, but like me, he's a business executive. Truthfully, Alonzo and I are too close to being the same person. I spoke to Alonzo's wife one day, and I thought it was my own wife. I'd closed my eyes, listened to her speaking. I'm like, wow, that's Lisa. I almost called Alonzo's wife Lisa. And I know when Alonzo met my wife, it was like, wow, this seems like the Teresa. So if somebody promotes something where they dislike a certain people because their political affiliation or the country they're from, I can't hire them. Because I promise you, if you're going to have a good team, you're going to hire people from all over the world with a variety of perspectives and a variety of backgrounds. So the second somebody says, I only like conservatives or I only like liberals, I can't hire them. They're toxic. And why are they toxic? Because a good team is going to have people with both perspectives. So think about that and think about the message, a message of unity. Now, Alonzo, you speak to people every single day. Now, on the interview, when I choose to hire somebody, since, I don't make people demonstrate stuff in front of me, I have to ask them questions. Now, Alonzo, you've done some interviews. How often do you find the attitude of, I can get the job done. I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. I think Alonzo's internet just went out again. For example.
I'll answer that one because I've heard that one a bunch of times too. It always makes me giggle a little bit.
The people that are willing to stick it out no matter how hard it is. The people that will support their team. The time when there's an RFP due that you stay up all night for 3 days straight to get the job done. Not normally, but under adverse circumstances. How often does somebody actually, because you've done lots of interviews, actually be able to show you that they're part of the team? They're willing to work. They're excited to work. They're passionate and energetic, enthusiastic about the job. How often do you see
that? It's very scarce. And one of the reasons is people have very difficult time actually demonstrating it aside from just from telling you the words, right? It's very similar also when you look at a job application, they'll tell you, I need a strong communicator. Well, what does that mean? You're telling me I love collaborating with my team. I like to prop them up. What does that mean? Can you explain that to me? Can you illustrate that to me? Help me understand how that fits the personality that I've so far come to know. And that's where a lot of people kind of fall off the wagon a little bit, because it's not necessarily the easiest thing to be able to help somebody understand, primarily because, let's be realistic, what I might deem to be collaborative might not be the same for you or for somebody else. So that's where you really truly need somebody to give you context. Perhaps we always like to use the term, tell me a story, which basically just give me a scenario where this has happened. And that is not predominantly there to gauge your technical competency, but to truly understand the person that you are. Because the reality is going to be, and this is what many people, they kind of miss the boat on it. But if I need to find out, can you work with me? Can I work with you? Because if you cannot work with me, you're going to be miserable because you're going to be answering to me. If I have to work with you and you can't follow direction, or you're not the type of person that wants to prop up the team, help the team, be that, I'm going to call that type of sun, right? The one that elevates you up, that kind of brightens the day, brightens the moods, upbuilds everybody, then perhaps you're not the person that would be best for the team. And especially in an environment like you mentioned that is quite stressful, IT can be stressful. We joke about it quite a bit. You do need people that have a level head on their shoulders and that can truly explain to you, basically articulate their position, who they are, what they have done it, and how they have done that. And that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and it's funny. When I started one job, and I worked with this company called Riverstone Networks. They were awesome. They had the best technology in the world. Unfortunately, they were terrible at business. They lost most of the deals. Company hemorrhaged money. Ultimately, they got sold to Alcatel, and then that technology got sold to Nokia. But it was great people and great technology. And I can remember, I had been hired, and they're like, Mike, they did announced a 30% layoff inside of the first 10 days that I was in the company. And I got a call from the VP of sales engineering, and he said, Mike, you're safe. Like, what do you mean I'm safe? I just got here yesterday. And he said, look, I already sent you to this proof of concept. It was my sales engineer's day right before becoming a principal architect there. And they said, none of your technology worked. But you went in and you called the team that actually designed the technology. They came in there and tuned it. You stayed calm. You raised whatever heck you needed in the back end. But when you were in the front of the customer, you were calm. He said, your paramedic firefighter days, your emergency medicine days. He said, you were so calm and relaxed during things. I can never find somebody like you. Not only are you not getting laid off, you'll be promoted at the end of this layoff. And there were 12 other layoffs there. So there's that. So let's take a couple of questions. And then after that, what we'll do is we'll continue this discussion. So let's take Ashish's question first. Tyrone, if you want to bring it in. And Ashish's question is then, sir, how do we develop critical and analysis skills or any other skills, and what is the basic path? So here's the thing. First, I need to know what job you actually want, Ashish. Because the critical analysis skills are very different for an engineer than they are in a cloud architect. So why don't I do this? Why don't I give you a list of skills for the cloud architect, and then I'll give you a list of skills for the cloud engineer. And I think that'll help the CCNA person that's also there. Here's what I need in a cloud architect. Someone that has a deep understanding of how these following technology works, and I'll give you the non-technology. I need him to understand the network and the data center. What does that mean? It means virtual machines and containers and container orchestration and storage area networks like block storage, object storage, file storage, how to tune them, how to design them, not to build them. Load balancers, reverse proxies, for example, and when to use what type of these devices. It means understanding what type of database should I use. And why should I use that database? How do I make that database scale? How do I performance tune that database, for example? Then, after that, it means understanding security, things like IDS, IPS systems, data loss prevention systems, SIEM systems, how they work and how they integrate together, how to design your security policy, how to architect your demilitarized zones, networking, things like IP addressing, subnetting, supernetting, wide area network technology selection, such as private lines versus IPsec VPNs versus software-defined networking versus WANs. But then it also involves business knowledge and business process re-engineering and presentation skills and sales skills and executive presence and leadership skills and presentation skills and high levels of emotional intelligence. That's for the architect. Now, Ashish, you did give me some more information. You said AWS engineer, admin / solutions engineer. So the first thing I want to tell you, there's no such thing as an AWS engineer. If all you learn is AWS, there'll be no value for you anywhere in the world. 98% of companies are multi-cloud. That means unless you want to work for only those 2% of companies that only use AWS, you are no longer valuable to the other 90%, 8% of employers. I invite you to learn the cloud. Now, you also mentioned engineer and admin in the same time versus solutions engineers. These are 3 different careers. A solutions engineer is typically like a pre-sales engineer that designs, presents, and sells something. They need those architect things I told you. The admin, there's no such thing as a need for an ad anymore. That's a technician that only knows how to click boxes. You talked about why I don't need that. So what do you need to be as an engineer? Well, that's different, Ashish. I need you to understand the tech. So I need you to know about virtual machines and how they work. So you're not going to learn that by an AWS solutions architect professional. They're just going to teach you how to click a box. But you can go out there and you can learn about type 1 hypervisors. You can learn about the Linux KVM. You can learn about VMware, for example. And you can learn CPU architecture, for example, and performance tuning of CPU and DRAM. And you can learn about systems themselves. Maybe go out there and build a server for the engineering, or buy a refurbished server that's out there. That's just a server. Now, containers and container orchestration. Why can't I use Azure Kubernetes Service, Google Kubernetes Service, or the AWS Kubernetes Service in a multi-cloud environment? Well, if I've got container orchestration and if I've got containers in three clouds, which is pretty normal, and now I've got the AWS orchestration system and the AWS cloud goes down, I lose everything I've got in Azure and Google. That's no good. I mean, look at the last 2 weeks. AWS has been down, Azure's been down, Google's been down. So I can't have something that's dependent upon a single cloud. So, for example, so you're going to need to learn that in depth, which means Kubernetes to be a cloud engineer. How the control plane works, how you architect it, how you scale it, how you performance tune it. Now we're into storage. Guess what? And we'll get to all these questions, and then we'll go back to the content. But I want to answer all your questions. Now we get into storage. What is storage performance like in the data center? What do I have access to in the data center? How do I performance tune it and scale it? Now, when I go to the cloud, I only have access to block storage. Block storage is really slow. How do I work around block storage? What type of RAID environments do I need to use? If I choose RAID 0, it gives me performance, but it also gives me no redundancy. I can't use RAID 4, 5, or 5 in the cloud, so I've got to use RAID 10. What does that mean? How does that impact course? How do I work around these things? Are there ways that I can use multiple drives, for example, in that virtual machine? This is engineering. Okay, let's go to this. And that's just storage. Now, databases. How do I scale that database? How do I look at the database and determine if it's a CPU, a memory performance, or a disk performance? You've got to learn the systems and learn those databases. Do I use read replicas? Maybe, if I've got a lot of read traffic, but what if it's not read traffic? That's not going to help. What about caching? Well, it's going to help a whole lot if I'm requesting frequently accessed information, but if I'm not, and it's all new information, it's going to slow it down and add another step of latency. Should I use a queue? And if I use a queue, why can't I use something like SQS? And why do I need to use a Kafka queue across my clouds? See, this is engineering. It's that performance tuning. It's a deep, deep, deep techie knowledge, far deeper than the architect, actually. And now an engineer is going to know Linux. So when I look at a Linux system, what's it telling me? Where's my performance limitation? Am I hitting that swap file too much in case I need to need the DRAM? Or is my CPU too busy? What's going on? So that's the kind of knowledge you need to get. And you're not going to get most of this on your own. You're going to have to get quality training from somebody that knows. Because when you don't know what you don't know, it's like the patient coming into the doctor's office, Googling their diagnosis. So there's that. But also, so you're going to need that level of Linux knowledge. Now, why does a cloud engineer need to know so much Linux? Because everything they put on there, everything they put on there is going to be on a Linux system. And that means you're going to need to install the applications on Linux, performance to the Linux. Same thing on Windows. You're going to have to understand Windows. Now, how do you automate? For that cloud engineer, that means Python. And of course, you can learn this. You can learn anything. I learned to practice medicine, but it took a long time. Now, when we train cloud architects, why do you think our program has over 800 hours of training in it? Because that takes that full 800 hours of training to get the good skills. Some of my students need 900 hours of training, and we go through it, but that's what it takes to know something. You don't get it in a single video. You don't get it in a certification course. And quite frankly, most of the certification courses that people came to us that actually have them and asked us to train them in cloud computing, because they can't get hired either, because somebody told them go out there and learn something, pass a cert, and go to Udemy and create a course on something you don't know, and people are going to think you're smart that way. Unfortunately, these people show the world they don't know. So basically, you're getting paid as much as a physician knows. That's the level of knowledge you need to know. About as much as a doctor knows. That's why when I started networking, I read 75,000 pages, and I spent hundreds of hours doing labs because I wanted to be a network engineer. It's that. That's an example. So you need to learn all this stuff in depth, because the world of needing a technician in the world of AI just doesn't exist anymore. And I hate saying it. I wish it wasn't that way, but it's true. You know, what we need that level of knowledge. And I can tell you, Mark can give me that level of knowledge to go back to engineering, because Mark was an engineer for a while. If I tell Mark, and I can say this to Mark, I'm going to have 200,000 remote users. I'm going to have 80,000 servers, and I'm going to have 14,000 remote locations. I need an IP addressing plan, a routing plan, a traffic engineering plan, and a security plan. He can do it. So I kind of hope that makes sense to you. That's what I need. And if I'm wanting an architect, I need someone that can talk like Alonzo, that can present like Alonzo, they can lead people to their goals, to be able to connect with them. And that's really where we're going from. So I hope I answered that question. And the key is you're going to have to learn at it. You're going to have to practice it. And you know what I learned in school, when I learned to practice internal medicine, this was one of the best lessons for life for me. I was in a class, and it was an advanced pharmacology class, the study of medications and how they move through the body and the way they affect the systems. And we'd passed our midterms, and now we're getting to the finals. And one of the cats in my class said to the professor, "Is it a cumulative exam, or do I just need to know the new stuff that's changed since the midterm?" And she said very intelligently, she said, "Life is cumulative. If you're going to practice medicine and you're not going to kill people, you need to remember everything we taught you. So go find a way to practice it every single day, learn it, and become better at it." That hit me so hard. That's the key that's really there. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Let me add something to this, Mike, for Ashish, because he kind of wrote in a few additional things. He first mentioned, how can you develop these skills? It's going to require practice. That's really what it's going to require. Yeah, you're not going to be able to simply just sit off your morals when you're reading a book. You're actually going to have to, as you're learning, let's say we're sticking with technology first. There's a lot more, of course, being competent at your job, but let's stick to the technology. Ashish, as you're learning the technology, you have to start digging into some of it at that particular level. We're not saying you need to learn it at an expert level, at a professional level. If you're going to start off at an associate's level or a beginner level, you take one technology, one piece of it, and that's where you dig into it. For example, if you're working on any type of database system and you're trying to find out, what are some ways that I can practice critical thinking, the way I can practice my analysis skill, what can I do in my learning itself that's going to help me develop those skills? Well, number one, find what problems are with the technology.
Yeah.
Simple problems that apply to you. And then try to find out what it is that you need to be looking at so that you can learn how to interpret it. So if these are going to be logs, based on some debug logs that you're going to have, if they're going to be based on logs that have been accumulated and stored on a different server, such as syslogs, then what you do is you take a look at them and you try to figure out, and let's say you do this in a lab environment preferably, then you try to figure out, when I do that actual implementation or that configuration, what is the baseline of that solution looking like right now? What messages should I be expecting? What are these messages that I'm looking at? And if you don't know, guess what? If you're using an open source type of technology, there's documentation that can help you understand what these log messages mean and how they're going to help you to basically figure out, is there capacity planning? What are the problems going to pop up? So then you can kind of dig a little bit deeper. Aside from that, it's going to take you time. This is not something that you're going to be able to simply rush in there and think from today to tomorrow, as long as I learn it right now, you hear that on YouTube a lot, learn everything right now, you're going to be the expert. Experts were not born, and experts need to develop. Rome wasn't built in a single day either. If you look at a lot of the people that are successful in what they do, and I don't mean you got to be like a Muhammad Ali, the best in the world, but if you're good at what you do, it took time, it took patience, it took humility. And that's kind of what you have to approach. So whatever technology you eventually dig into it, try to understand it from a conceptual level first. Try to understand, if I'm in an associate's level, what are my problems? What do these problems look like? How do they actually come about, so that you can understand the logs that you're going to be looking at? And then do this one step at a time. That's why we have training that is for beginners. We have training for intermediate people. We have training for experts. Then we even have training for people that are not going to try to understand, how can I marry technology with business requirements? So now we're delving into the realm of more designer and architects, right? That type of role. So it's going to take you some time, but don't disparage, don't give up. Just understand, anytime we learn something new, we're going to feel stupid, and nobody wants to feel stupid, but it's part of the learning process. And then once you get the hang of that, build on top of it. Build the layers, one layer to another layer. And just remember, just put one foot in front of the other one, if that's the case, and don't give up.
Well said, Mark.
Yeah, and that's the key. We all start out knowing nothing. Look, my cat Cindy, everybody knows I love my cat Cindy. She was born with survival skills. She, knew how to look for food, knew how to clean herself, knew how to move. Humans, we would die within the first day if somebody didn't feed us, care for us. Humans are born with no instincts. But here's the greatest thing. Humans have a greater capacity to learn than any other species in the world. That means every one of you, if you wanted, could become a physician, an attorney, a cloud architect, anything. You can do it all. But what's needed is you need to know what there are the right skills and get them. I've changed careers a lot of times. I got to tell you, I was a firefighter paramedic. Truth be told, I'm so bad with tools. They said, why don't you be a Band-Aid pusher and stay to the ambulances, because you're not going to be great at using these Hearst tools and popping doors off cars. So I did. Then I became a nurse, which I did not like. And then I learned to practice medicine as a nurse practitioner. Then I became a network engineer because I thought it was really cool. And then I realized very quickly that I wanted nothing to do with engineering, and I wanted to move into architecture. So I became an architect, and it was a new set of training. And I spent most of my life as an architect. Now, I'm also a strength and conditioning expert. Why? Because I love fitness. I couldn't walk for 7 years and had to become a 500-hour yoga instructor. Yes, 500 hours of training in just yoga for that entry-level bit for me. Became a strength and conditioning specialist, the kind of people that work with pro athletes, and took every other thing I could. Nutrition things, because it's what interested me. And, I probably spent 1,500 hours learning fitness because it was my love. It was another form of health and wellness, but that's really what it takes. You all can do it, all of you. But you just have to understand what's needed from you. And it's not what you think it is. It's going to be much, much more, because we're in a world with AI. We're in a world, we're on the cloud, and I don't need people to do all those basic things. So much of it's already done for you. I need people to think. Truth be told, I always needed people that could think, but I need it more than ever. Tyron, you can bring in the next one, and we'll all answer it as a group.
Right, I'll read this one, Mike, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to go ahead and read it?
No, I'll jump in. CCNAC. Hi, Mike and team. Quick question. If someone from a tech support background is looking to transition into cloud roles, could you advise on how to identify relevant opportunities, certs, etc.?
Okay, yes. So the first thing we need to talk about, and this is a lot of the heart of what we're talking about, you know tech support, which means in order to go to the cloud, you're going to have to learn the cloud. Because what you've done before is not the same as where you're going. So if you were a pharmacist and all of a sudden you wanted to practice medicine, you'd have to go to medical school. If you were an expert mechanic at fixing airplane engines, now you want to be a pilot, you need to go to school and learn. If you're a flight attendant, you need to and you want to be a pilot, you need to learn. You're a physician, you want to work as an attorney, you got to go to law school. So the first thing is determining what role you want. Because nothing in your background and support is going to get you the next role. What you've trained in support will get you support. Now, when you want to move into a bigger role, there's a reason I don't advise people to go to support or ever start in their career in support. And here's the reason. But that's okay. I'm going to tell you what to do about it anyway, so you're going to be successful. It's very rare that I've ever called support and I found somebody helpful on the opposite end of the phone. I usually call support, say there's something wrong with my firewall, and I call and get first line support at Cisco Meraki. They don't know anything about networking. I go to Escalated, and after about 3 days, I get to somebody that can help me. Unfortunately, that is the perception of support. I call support at my internet service provider, and they don't even know they have routers and switches in there because, there's that. So a lot of people have had some bad experiences with support, but that's okay. You can also learn a tremendous amount in support if you're good too. So there's a lot of good that comes from support. So the first thing you need to do is get past the branding of support. Now that's going to be going out there and showing you as a solution provider. You've got a great knowledge. You'd be a great asset to companies. You communicate well. You lead well. Talk about the soft skills and customer relationship management skills you obtain in support. Because if you can do that and emotional intelligence you got out of that, you will stand out. Now the next thing is to determine what cloud job you want. You want to be a cloud architect? Do you want to be a cloud engineer? Do you want to be a cloud developer? Do you want to be a cloud database expert? So we've got to fix that. And then we get the right training, and only then are you there relevant for the opportunities. Because what you did yesterday is meaningless with regards to where you want to go for your future. If you were a doctor yesterday and you told me you wanted to be, Balwinter Kerr was a stay-at-home mom, but Microsoft was sure happy to hire as a cloud architect. Jeffrey West, by comparison, was doing geospatial imaging in a non-tech role. 6 months later, Callian hired it. Yvonne Campbell was working as a waiter, but AWS was totally happy to hire him as a solution architect after we trained him. Pierre Dassault was working on sailboats. Guess what? His first job after our training was a solution architect for Lease Web. So it really, Daniel Bosa was selling shoes at Nordstrom before our JP Morgan Chase hired him as a solution architect. Al Legister was a sales rep for Kimberly-Clark. He left our training program as a senior solutions architect with Deloitte. What he did is they got the training. So CCNA-C, what would you like to do? It's not what you've done in the past that determines what you can do in the future. It has no bearing on what you did. 3 days ago, I got to tell you, my friend Ted came over, my wife was away, and we actually went to my favorite restaurant, Miller's Ale House. I had a cheeseburger. I actually had some broccoli with butter on it, and I actually had 2 martinis with them. Woke up the next morning with a headache because I don't really drink alcohol. Felt a little overstuffed. Went to the gym, did my yoga, sat in a sauna for a half an hour, and then I've eaten healthy ever since. What I ate yesterday has no bearing on what I do today. Same thing about your career. What you did yesterday has no bearing on your future. What do you want to do? And what are you willing to do to go learn it? So you can do anything. Tell me what you want, and I'll tell you the skills that you need to get there. But if somebody asked me, which airplane should I get on? I'd say, where do you want to go? If they don't say, I don't know, I'd say, well, the Greek islands are beautiful this time of year. Maybe consider it. If it was December, I might say, go to Dubai. We'll talk about experience luxury. It's kind of beautiful. If they said, I want to go to Europe, but I want all my modern comforts, I'd probably say, go to London. So where you want to go is determining the path you take. And they all require a different airplane path. But you can do anything, and that's really the secret.
From Mohammed, evolving skills during work will be good for with cases. I guess that's it.
Yeah, and Mohammed, someday I'm going to learn Arabic so I can really communicate with you better. Mohammed, I have such a tremendous degree of respect for you. You attend everything you possibly can to do better. I know other tech companies where I'll be speaking soon, and you frequent their things as well. You're awesome, Mohammed. So, yeah, the key is when you go to work and you have a job, it's really easy. You volunteer for the biggest, scariest, hardest projects that no one else is willing to do. When the managers and the team call and says, we have this opportunity, who's interested? And here's what you see. Everybody kind of like covers their eyes and puts their head on the down and tries to hide, or goes and makes a phone call and walks out of the room. Me, I want that. And I'll tell you, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You can do it all. And Mohammed, one day I'm going to go to some Somalian beaches and love to meet you over there. I really do want to see it. The beaches there are great. And I'd love to meet you because I really, really, really respect your diligence and energy and passion for being great. And you're doing a good job. I see what you're learning and where you're learning. Keep it up.
TM, would I be able to do this with little experience in a previous corporate job?
Well, TM, I don't know what this is. But I can tell you there is nothing you can't do. Alonzo was a 30-year marketing executive. He's darn good. And Alonzo and I are like twin brothers. I mean, we're so similar and we speak all the time. And we like all the same things. It's kind of scary and crazy, but, you know, kind of keep about that. He came to us. He took a bunch of ridiculous, silly certifications from a certification provider that really didn't know what they're doing. Couldn't find anything. Took our training. We trained him. And he got hired in the cloud. He had a great cloud job. But truth be told, you know, our whole company didn't feel right without Alonzo. He was like some big thing that everybody was comfortable with, a big giant teddy bear, if you will. And everybody loves a big giant teddy bear. And I begged him to come work for us and kind of help our students. And he's done so many good things for our students. He's actually helping me with the recommendation to help somebody up later today to help them with something because he's a rock star. But, you know, you can do anything. I mean, it just doesn't matter. I mentioned some people whose first job was a cloud architect, but I'll mention some more. Richard Ferrari was working in the fraud department in a non-technical role at a bank, and they hired him as a solution architect after our training. Coyote was a college student hired by AWS as a solutions architect. Who's another one? Lenny Burnett was our video editor, but he got hired by Citrix when we were done. Delroy Batt was working on ambulances before he got hired as a cloud security architect. So Jermaine Hifton, his first tech job was as an enterprise architect, and he was selling landscaping gear. So, you know, people tell me age matters. It didn't matter to 61-year-old Robert Welch or 63-year-old Sig Wolf, who we trained and got them hired across multiple countries. So that's really the key, is you can do it. Of course you can. But the question is, what are you willing to do? How much training are you willing to get? Are you willing to get quality training? And are you willing to do the work? Yeah. That's the key.
One of the things about it, you have to be passionate about it. One thing about Mike, our parallels, is that I had different careers before I finally landed into the tech cloud architecture space. So find something that you really love to do, something that you're willing to stay up at night. Like case in point, I have a wife, I'm married, I got 2 great kids. But when it comes to time, that is a premium for me. So if I want to learn something, it's after I help my son with his homework, which he started school again for the fall today. And if my wife has any honeydew things that she wants me to do at the end of the day, everybody's satisfied. Roll up your sleeves. If you want to get to that goal, find that time, cut that time, prioritize that time. Netflix, cut it to the side. Anything on Hulu or anything on Amazon Prime, why don't you delay that membership for a while? Because when you look back and you reach your goals and say, I did what it took to get there, you're going to be proud of yourself as well as everyone around you.
Yeah, actually, and let me add something small there for
everybody here. And actually, Alonzo added something really important there. But go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Alonzo mentioned goals and plans. Many times people just set goals. And there is many times only one way to get to a goal. And when it fails, people give up, they get dismotivated. When you have a plan, a plan allows you the flexibility on perhaps kind of working around some obstacles that you get. In the sphere of IT, we call this resilience. You kind of plan to get around a failure, but you can still reach your goal. So you need to understand that it's more important to plan for success and then work around the different failures that you will inevitably have. And there could be anything from having to do better with your time management. Alonso mentioned that many times we have to take the time or buy out the time because we only have 24 hours, all of us, and it's at a premium. Time is something that we just can't make more of, unfortunately. So that's going to be the important part. But remember to plan and then execute, and know that even if you have a setback here and there, it is not to impact your overall plan. And if that's to become a cloud architect, if this is to become a security, a network, application, cloud engineer, whichever it may be, just have your plan in place, have training, because training is also going to keep you motivated as you make in progress, as you reach these milestones, which we call goals, as you kind of steam or bulldoze your way towards your objective of becoming that architect or that engineer.
Yeah, so I want to reiterate two things. One is what Mark said. A goal without a plan is just a dream. You have to have a plan. Most businesses that people start fail, and almost all of them without a business plan fail. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to likely get to your goal. The second side of it is time is our most precious commodity. You know what happened when I wanted to move to networking? I didn't watch TV for 9 months straight. I spent 1 hour with my wife each day, made sure it was quality time. I spoke to her ahead of time and said, and she said, I know you want to be in tech. She said, I know the amount of time you have. Let's just set aside 1 hour each day that we keep between us. The rest of that, do anything you need. I support you. And obviously I would do the same thing for her. There's that. But you're going to have to give up something. We only have so much time. Here's things that you can give up that add no value to you. Watching YouTube shorts, watching Instagram videos, watching like YouTube, what do they call them? Reels, going to TikTok and watching dancing. And even my favorite, cat videos. If there's a cat doing something, love to see it. There's this Penny the cat that I like to watch. There's this Chase the cat that I like to watch that's out there. And there's this cat called Paquita that loves to cuddle with its owner. And I love cat videos, but I got to tell you, when I have work to be done, no cat videos for me. I like to watch the financial news in the morning, but if I've got work to be done, I don't watch the financial news in the morning. I go into this blackout zone and I'm 100% focused on something until I come out of it. And I can do that because I've got lots of people with MBAs on my staff, like Chris and Alonzo. I can pretty much say, if I needed to, keep track of the economy in the short term and give me a short-term briefing. So the answer is kind of keep that in the back of your mind. A goal without a plan is a dream. And honestly, there's going to be two ways you can do this. If you don't get a plan and don't get the right plan, here's what's going to happen. You're going to fail, 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 fail. And either you're going to be tough enough to stick it out and then get the advice from people who know what they're doing, or you're going to quit. If you've got a plan and the plan is the right plan and you know what you need to do there, you'll be able to execute on your plan. And sure, you'll run into a failure here or there. And that's when you adapt, you improvise, and you overcome. I feel like we need an oorah after that, but whatever. And until you get to the solution that you're going to. If you are tough in here, there's nothing you can do. You know, I always respected the way the SEALs got their training. They go to this thing called Basic Underwater Demolition School. And here's what they do. They give these guys physical torture. On the first day, they pretty much run a marathon along with doing about 500 push-ups, 500 pull-ups, 500 sit-ups, 500 squats, resting in the cold ocean. That's just day one. And they do this for a long period of time. And here's the goal. Make the weak quit. And the people that are crazy enough to survive until the end, that are tough enough to survive until the end, they make great SEALs. And you know what happens when they leave the SEALs? They start companies, they become CEOs. You hear about them every single day. Every day. Because they're unstoppable. Because when you have that grit, that level of grit, you can do anything. I've got students that literally earn $2 a day in their home countries and are now earning, close to $200,000 a year. Now, they would never quit until they got to their goals. And that's the person you hire. Quite frankly, I've hired some of those people without the right skills because I knew that they would do anything that it took to get there. But it's that. But in today's world, we have to think about something. Here's why you need to be skilled. What if I told you that the average tenure is about 9 months for most people on their first tech job? What if I told you that it takes 9 months to a year to take somebody unskilled and get them almost to the point where they're able to work or do something for you? Which means you've got to dedicate like a $200,000 employee to go train that person and mentor them for the year. And guess what happens after 9 months? They go to your competition and then hurt you. So companies cannot hire this. They need to hire people with skills that can do the job. Quite frankly, they're in a position where they're struggling with productivity in a level we haven't been. Tyrone, bring in some of the other ones. Leonard Goba. Hi, Mike and company. Great so far. How can cloud architects or similar roles document their work solutions designs, RFPs to be visible to recruiters? Well, Leonard, I know your situation. I think you're either in Africa or you just came to the US from Africa. You've got a public health background and a couple of master's degrees. You've been an architect already for years. When you're in that public health sort of environment, you're architecting healthcare solutions. You're thinking about obtaining the financial resources and the medical resources via supply chains. You're thinking about disrupting them. You're thinking about training the medical team and the people that are going to be providing the care. You're thinking about the systems, including the people, the processes, and technology that will enable you to deliver better care. You've already been an architect, Leonard. You just didn't know it. You were a healthcare architect. So you've already 50% there. Now, that's different than if you had an engineering background where you're building stuff and now you got to learn how to design stuff. That's still a valuable background, but you actually have more, which is why it's typically so easy to get a nurse or a physician or an executive in an architect role. It's typically so easy. And that's why people like Wallace Agana, who was a sales rep in Ghana, went and got a enterprise architect job in what do you call it, at JP Morgan Chase Bank as his first job, because you've got that. So you've already got a lot of this whole enterprise architecture, business architecture knowledge down pat. Now the key is for you to go out there and start creating content. With your background, level, and experience, what kind of knowledge could improve healthcare? What's going on with radiography and radiographs that AI could do to potentially reduce the number of mistakes? Leonard, what if I told you that in the US, medical errors are the third leading cause of death? I'm not joking. It's pretty pathetic. So what could technology do to obtain better information from the patient, connect providers with better decision support systems, enable them to better access information and deliver better care? What types of communications and collaboration technology do we have that could get physicians and specialists and nurses and other parts of the integrated care delivery team together? That's what you create content on. You create content and you talk about the people, the processes, and the technology, all of it. And that's where people don't get architect jobs. They think it's just tech. And they don't understand we're designing systems to optimize business performance, which means in every architecture, we need to know the business's goals, the business's pain points, the business's challenge. We need to understand how is the business, what are the business processes, what is the business architecture. Then we need to evaluate their current tech and figure out what new tech we need to do based upon those business goals, pain points, challenges, and future business processes. Then we need to determine if that organization has the sophistication for the tech. Because while Mark and I might like to run out an MPLS-enabled backbone with traffic engineering and 40 millisecond failover, if they don't have me, Mark, or an equivalent, that nobody can manage that network. And if the second it breaks, nothing's going to happen to it. They can't adopt it. Then we need to think about the stakeholders and making sure that what we do for one part of the business doesn't impact another part of the business. And you've got a lot of experiences, Lena, that you can talk about that from your vast experience in public health and things. So there's that. You create content, and every time you create the content, the technology is solving a problem, as opposed to talking about the technology being cool. And the world will reach out to you. Plus, you're training with us. So you can talk about your security architect projects, your cloud architecture projects, your big data architecture projects, which are in our course, some of the AI architecture projects you've done. And these projects are system design. Because building a project showing me that you can create a WordPress website is meaningless to me if you're an architect. Showing me that you can write a Python script as an architect is also meaningless to me because you're not going to be writing code. Now, if you were a cloud engineer, that would be critical to me. But I need to know that you can walk into a boardroom, that you can persuade the CEO, the CFO, and the CIO to be willing to spend $500 million on your technology to get their buy-in and support to change their business processes and create a top-down directive so that people in the company will follow it. Right. Leonard, that's your skill. That's your strength. That's where you're great at. Focus on that and add the technology to it. And I think you'll be surprised at how far you'll go and how fast.
Good points, Mike.
And just a little bit more information for Leonard, just so that he understands. Yep. When you're using things that you've worked on, meaning a production environment, regardless if this is an engineering or architecture, you always want to make sure that you're actually allowed to use facets of that architecture to be able to discuss it, right? So if you can sanitize the data just enough so that you can use it, of course, ask for permission, then do it. But something interesting here that you can keep in mind as an architect, a lot of the times, the things that we will be working on are actually transferable to different type of designs and architectures.
Yeah.
So what you could actually do is, in like a little mini series, you can come up with ways to apply the things that you have worked on in a fictitious type of use case. And there's nothing wrong with that. Give you an example for even some of the higher level type of managerial roles or certifications or exams, same with like the CCDE, they're based on actual use cases, but they're made fictitious in the sense that they're not going to give you the company name. They're not going to give you the real figures. So they do sanitize the data just enough to give you a scenario that could be plausible in real life, but is not exactly like that multi-million or multi-billion-dollar project that somebody just worked on. And you can do the same thing by just applying and changing the data as applicable for your use cases. And that way you can also show your actual expertise in applying the things that you have done across a different type of domain, if that's how you want to showcase it. But just remember, get permission if you're going to use something in a real environment. Make sure that you sanitize the data. Don't use the exact same type of design that you have recommended, because let's be honest, many of us would notice if somebody worked for, let's say, Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, and all of a sudden they display to us what their internal infrastructure would look like when it comes to their data center, right? We would recognize it after a point. So you wouldn't want to do an exact copycat of that. So just keep that in mind, please.
Yes. Let's bring in this very critical thing from Foolish the Crow. And I want to bring that in and talk about why that is the case. Then we'll answer the rest in order. It's the one that says, I see there's a strong, okay. So Foolish the Crow said, I see, so there is a strong sales emphasis. I'm going to tell you this right now. Do you want to be successful in life? Learn sales. Now, as an architect, knowing how to sell will make the difference of, say, 10 different, can mean a $10 million difference in your salary throughout your life. But this was a lesson that was taught to me. When I was first practicing internal medicine, I was a nurse practitioner those days, I had to put a patient on a drug called cumulative. It keeps the blood from clotting if somebody has a certain heart rhythm where they'll get a big stroke and either die or be permanently disabled for the rest of their life. And I tried to prescribe my patient Coumadin, which was the right treatment. And when I told the patient they needed to take Coumadin, otherwise they would likely die that year, they said, I'm not taking it, it's rat poison. So what I did, I got the other doctor. He came in and he said, if you don't take this, you're going to die. And he said, if you take this, you can have the long life. Mike is super smart, super capable about it. You're either going to die or wish you were dead based upon how disabled and how bad you're going to be if you don't take this. Please take Mike's medication. Yes, doctor. Yes, doctor. And he took it. Now, I'll tell you that doctor came in and he said, Mike, that's not my preferred sales tactic, but I know you're pretty good with people. He said, I figured we had to go there. He said, Mike, and he handed me some Dale Carnegie books, and he said, if you want to be good at medicine, sell. He said, Mike, you just got married too. And he said, if you can't sell your wife into anything, all you're going to do is do exactly everything she wants 100% of the time. He said, if you know how to sell, you'll do what you want 90% of the time, and up to 10% of the time, you'll be able to do what you want and still have harmony in your house. Here's the thing, foolish the world. I met with a client and designed a $1.1 billion architecture. He said yes. I had a unified communications architecture I needed to do. And prior to me selling that unified communications architecture, the customer had issued a press release that said, we've removed Cisco to a security flaw. The amount of press release of we're going back to Cisco for this reason was incredibly valuable to the business. An architect that can sell $100 million a year of products and services, I can pay $800,000 to. An architect that can sell $3 million in products and services to, I can pay $200,000 to. So at the end of the day, sales will be the biggest determining factor of your pay in any type of a cloud architect or a solution architect role. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, sales is not a dirty word. It's not like you're going to tell somebody they have to buy this car right now, and if they leave and walk off the lot, they'll never get this discount again. That is not sales. I don't know what you call that. That is unethical behavior to try and, I guess it's car sales, but that's not the kind of sales we're talking about. The kind of sales we're talking about is examining a client, examining the business, and understanding their pain points, and being able to solve the problem where the problem you solve, let's say it costs $50 million, solves a $200 million business problem. That is how you sell. So it's about, literally speaking, working for the client and not just selling something to get your commission, but giving them something that makes it better. And here's the key. When you sell, and you have to sell in all these cloud architecture roles, solution architect roles, enterprise architecture roles, your name is all you've got. So it's about treating people with fairness, honesty, decency. When something doesn't work, fixing it fast. Because if you don't have your good name, you've got absolutely nothing. I know if Alonzo talks to somebody, I know he's going to do what's right for them. Mark II, Chris for them. I don't even have to think about it. I just know. And that's having the right kind of people. But sales is a very important skill. Tyrone, we go back in order.
Earn joy. Can someone from the transportation section transition to enterprise architect, or should you start with being a cloud architect?
So earn joy, it all depends on you and your background and your level of education. So what are you doing in the transportation industry? Are you driving trucks? Do you own your own trucking company where you're determining routes and you're determining planning and you're determining staffing and you're determining, how and where you're going to get your fuel at the cheapest prices? Because that's architecture. And a lot of that is business architecture, which goes into enterprise architecture. Now, again, I don't believe what you did yesterday has any bearing in your future. Now, I will tell you, for Jermaine Houston, whose first job was an enterprise architect, he had good sales skills. And even if you work for an end client and you want to design a solution, you have to persuade the chief financial officer to give you the money for it. You have to persuade the CEO and potentially the board to adopt your solution because it's going to have an impact on their business. So Jermaine Houston, whose first tech job was an enterprise architect, learned to sell. By comparison, Earn Joy, Wallace Agana was a sales rep, and his first job was an enterprise architect because he could learn to sell. Now, I had this really great guy, and Singer was his last name. He was over in London. He's now living in Manchester. He took our training, and he got his first tech job after our training as a chief technology officer of a faith-based organization. I'm very proud of him. He was a rock star. This guy took the class, came in as many classes as he could, asked questions, participated. He was honestly incredible. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So the answer is yes, you can. Now, here's what I would say. Train to be an enterprise architect. For example, I'll tell you how we do our enterprise architecture training. There's two kinds of enterprise architects that are out there. There's the kind that has no knowledge about any technology whatsoever, and they're real just good business executives. I've met a lot of them. And then here's the other side of it. The kind of people that understand the technology and understand the business. So when we train enterprise architects, we do the following. We have our enterprise architecture courses where we talk about business process re-engineering and all the business aspects and all of it. And we also make them take our cloud architect classes, which are how to design, present, and sell the technology solutions for a company, because everything is cloud at this point. Now, if it's a data center, it's either going to be OpenStack, which is a cloud, Nutanix, which is a cloud, or VMware, which is a cloud. Everything's cloud. Or they're going to be in a public cloud like AWS, Azure, or Google, for example, Alibaba, Oracle. It doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff. It's just different names. And the reality is 98% of organizations are going to have a data center and multiple clouds. So that's why we do it. And that why be giving people the full realm of the technical perspective and now the perspective of the business perspective. They can do anything. So I would say train to be an enterprise architect if that's your goal. But make sure you learn cloud architecture at the same time, because it's part of enterprise architecture at this point. And it really doesn't matter. I train people for cloud architecture because it's a big role. They can work as a cloud architect or a solutions architect or a lot of times an enterprise architect. But what do you really want to do? Where you put your focus is what you're going to be good at. If somebody puts their focus on orthopedic surgery, what are they going to be good at? Orthopedic surgery. Now, they won't be good at cardiology. They won't be good at internal medicine. They won't be good at nephrology or endocrinology. They'll be good at orthopedic surgery. Focus on somebody's teeth. You'll be great at teeth. So where do you put your love? Where do you put your time? Where do you put your energy? That's going to determine your outcome. And obviously, if you guys want to add to this or have a different perspective, please let me know.
Well, you know what? I also think, Earnjoy, when it comes to transportation, regardless if you own your own company or you're driving a prospective vehicle for someone else, you're conversing with people. You are talking about where are you going? How do you want to get there? Where are your routes? Are you lost? I mean, you're probably dealing with helping people get on the bus. You're dealing with middle age. You're dealing with a wide spectrum of people. And that requires you to talk to them in different ways to help them relax, not worry if they got on the wrong route, and be able to help facilitate solutions so that they can get where they need to go. It's the same thing with the cloud architect. You are not only selling solutions, but you're selling emotions. Being a cloud architect, I'm responsible for communicating and working with teams to deliver multi-million and in some cases billion-dollar solutions. It's going to be a little bit of some stress involved.
And it looks like Alonzo's really terrible ISP situation is affecting him. He's in an area where you can only get one internet service provider. And unlike Mark and I and Chris, so we have 3 different internet service providers. And actually, we run BGP to different ISPs, so we can fail over automatically. Alonzo is
but you
not
also
there,
are going to.
We'll have to fix his geography somewhere along the line.
Let me add a little thought there for everybody.
Please, Mark.
There was a time in history, and I'm not trying to go thousands of years back, but just think of it. There was a time in history where the concept of a chair was foreign to people. It was just foreign. We sat on the floor, for example. But at some point, somebody had an idea. That's all it was. It was an idea. And they took this idea and they conceptualized it, visualized it. They thought it through. And eventually they came up with a design that we know as a chair, something that was useful. Now, perhaps it wasn't the most comfortable chair to begin with, but it started with a thought, with an idea. So if you have the thought and the idea in your mind that you want to accomplish something, it can come true if you're willing to do what is necessary to make that idea come through. The only one that will ever stop you is you. Now, of course, there are certain circumstances. If you're in countries that just you don't have the same opportunities, you don't have the same tools, there might be some drawback from that. But generally speaking, as long as you are not the limiting factor, as long as you're not the bottleneck, you can accomplish whatever you want. And there's people out there that are willing to help you. Sometimes it will cost you a little bit because we all have to eat. Other times, you know what it will cost you? A little humility. That's what it will cost you. But whatever you can think of, as long as you dedicate yourself to it, you're willing to do what is necessary for you. Because what is necessary for you might be different from what is for me. You can accomplish it, regardless of where you came from. That is why America was such a great place for many people, right? They came from other countries because of the great opportunities. And people in some countries that were just, let's say, taxi drivers, they became doctors. Now, what does that mean to you? Were they never capable of doing it? Of course they were. Maybe they just need the opportunity. But in them, they were willing to do what it takes. Maybe they started off driving a taxi in the United States, and they did that during the day. At night, they went and educated themselves. They lost some sleep. But the next day, they did it all over again. And it might take them a few years, but the next thing you know, guess what? They were a doctor. They managed it. Why? Because they never gave up. They had an idea, and they made sure that they wanted to execute it. So it doesn't matter if you're transportation, if you're technical support, if you have a flower store. It doesn't matter.
Nope.
You can do it. If you can think it, if you can imagine it, if you're willing to do the work. And that's the important part. If you're willing to do the work, then you can accomplish it. So just keep that in mind. That's my little motivational speech to sell you on the idea that you can do whatever you want to do.
And Mark's right. You know, my father-in-law came to America from Greece. He owed money on his airplane tickets to the family that sponsored him to come here. He got a job as a dishwasher from 7 to 3. From 3 to 11, he worked as a cook. And he and his brother actually had a cement business fixing people's cement in Philadelphia. And I'll tell you, he did that for 7 years. Then he had enough money to buy a restaurant. And then poof, next thing you know, his kids are all going to school. He's giving houses and things to his children. And he was in a position that he lived the life that he wanted. Did he work for it? Wow, did he work for it. But I got to tell you, one of the most inspiring people I've ever met in my life. I lost my father-in-law about 1.5 years ago. It crushed me because he was so special to me. But I'll tell you, he lives on in here and in here. And the things that he taught me about diligence and fight, believed in me, honestly, when I was a kid. So sorry, I get a little emotional. He was just such a special person. But keep that in the back of your mind. Anybody can do anything. What holds most of us back is ourselves.
And you hear it, right? You heard it from Mike. Many don't know with me, but I also don't come from a tech background. So a lot of us simply, we weren't born with the router in our hand, if you want to call it that way, or the load balancer, or the mystic cloud, you know, the data center that has virtualization on top of it. We weren't born with it, many of it. But at some point, we made a decision to want to go into it. Now, whatever that decision is, that is yours. You need to understand your reasons for doing so. But just understand, you're not the first. There's others that have walked the path. That's why we do shows like this. That's why we do our question and answer session, right? Because we have been there. We have gone through it. We know what it means to go from an industry that we didn't even know how to spell BGP to learning how to spell it, what it is, how it functions. Some of us have evolved to understanding not just the configuration, but what am I really using it for? How does it help a business? What are some instances why a business would use it? So we all have taken steps from what would be considered nothing, no experience, and have developed ourselves over the years by being consistent. And what you do have to learn is discipline. And even with disciplines, there's degrees of discipline. Many times people, they attempt to do something that requires 100% discipline, but they haven't even learned how to be 1% disciplined. You know, simple thing could be such as, do you make your bed in the morning? That takes discipline to do it consistently. If you can't even do that, how do you expect to make $100,000, $200,000? You're not capable of making your bed, right? You got to think of it. It's stages, it's steps. There's some ways to accelerate it. For example, Mike tells a story a lot. He wanted to accelerate his career. He could not accelerate time. Time cannot be accelerated, just like it can't be bought, it can't be sold. Time is there. It's just in that instance. The instance that we have now was already the past, right? So what did he do? He took a different asset or different resource, money, and he accelerated his career by spending the money on the training, on the experience that would help him to get towards his goal and then also accomplish his plan. Some of us, we don't always have the finances to do so. So what do we got to do? We got to keep investing the time and take one step or another. But either way you do it, it is possible as long as you're willing to actually do it consistently and move ahead. And of course, good training helps. I mean, don't get me wrong. Somebody who can help actually understand certain things instead of you just reading business use cases or technical training can get you a long way. It can kind of get rid of some of the pitfalls that many of us can have in the beginning when we're trying to learn anything new.
Yeah. And, you know, Mark brings a point. I know I told Mark I don't talk about it a lot because it's hard for most people to understand. I spent $40,000 on tech training 25 years ago, which was the equivalent of about $100,000. Now, I had some money, to be fair. I had credit cards, which had no balances. I borrowed some money from my father-in-law and brother-in-law. And their response was, I'm like, I'll pay you back. And they were like, honestly, I just want you to be successful and be able to take care of my sister or my mother and my daughter. I'm like, that's okay. I need to be able to pay you back in my mind and heart so I can feel good about myself. So if you think about it, to do a CCNA, a CCDA, a CCNP, a CCDP, and a CCIE inside of 9 months, Mark, how many people are able to do that?
What is it, 0.01% maybe, if they're willing to?
Right. Now, if I didn't spend that $40,000, I could have become that CCIE, but it would have taken me 3 or 4 years. Now, what I did is I built a business case for everything. I'm a business executive. I went to an MBA program twice, and I have a lot of executive training. And I look at it and said, well, in 1999, CCIEs were earning $100 an hour or more, getting 60 hours a week, which was $300,000 a year. And I said, well, if I spend this $40,000 I don't have, and it can raise my salary by $150,000 a year, that's a whole lot worth it. And it's a whole lot cheaper than $250,000 to medical school or law school to earn less than the architect, than the CCIE. So I did it. But that was a business case. Had I had a less giving family, it would have taken me 3 years or 4 years. Now, that additional money that I took out in loans and things enabled me to do things like buy houses in cash when I was young, to not have mortgage payments, because my salary was good enough. But it doesn't matter where you're at. We all can go anywhere. Maybe you have more time than money. Fine. Invest your time. Maybe you've got the ability to finance it like I did. Fine. But you can all do it. But you need to get the knowledge. If somebody wants to learn networking, I can give them the 50 or 70,000 pages they need to read that are going to make them CCI grade. I could. And I did it myself personally. So did Mark. But, that was a time. Thankfully, I learned how to read quicker because I had to do it from my healthcare background. And that's my skill. Now, if the next time Mark comes over at my house, I'll be the first one to say, hey, while you're here, do you know how to hang a picture? And I don't need him to hang a picture. But the point is, I don't know how to use a hammer. Like, it all literally zero speaking. When it comes to my cabling in my house, there's cables that look like this until my brother comes over and fixes it for me because he knows how to do it. So you don't have to be great at everything in life. You just have to be great at your career and whatever you find meaningful and important to you. And the better you are at typically speaking, the worse you'll be at others.
Yeah, we have this weird tendency to, and there's a time and a place for it, but we have this tendency to always compare ourselves to other people. And we forget that there's steps to it, that there's levels to this. What Mike did, he just gave you a little runaround. It wasn't a roundabout. It wasn't from yesterday to today that he made these changes. It took some time. Now, he accelerated, but it still took time. So it's not realistic to look at, let's say, Mike and say, you know what, in 9 months, I'm going to be Mike. Because what made Mike Mike was also his medical background, the training that he had there. So there's levels to this and steps. But, for example, in that case, could you say, I would like to emulate aspects that makes Mike great, or that you appreciate from me, Alonzo, Chris, or the rest of the team? You can emulate things that you believe are going to make you a better person, either professionally, personally, whatever it is. And then until you get to a level where you have enough competency, then you start comparing yourself to others, because now you have a measuring stick. But what I would suggest to you to do, irregardless of what level you are, compare yourself to the person you were yesterday and what you are today. If you have made some progress there, just a little bit, again, it could be something with tech, you've improved and you've gotten better. And that's really the point there. You get better every day, but it has to be something that you do with awareness and that you do with actual intent. There has to be real intent. It can't be by accident. You can't be good at something simply because you woke up and it just happened. I wish it'd be great, like in the Matrix, right? You plug in and next thing you know, I know how to configure BGP. It just doesn't work that way. But have an intent, be consistent in it, and try to be better than what you were yesterday. And I think that's going to help everybody stop focusing on others that have had 20 years in an industry and you have nothing. Take the start. Start first, get somewhere. And once you get to a competency, then you can say, like, how does my competency compare to a CCA such as Mike? How does it compare to a CCA like somebody like Brian McGann? That's where you can do things like that. Or like Russ White, right? We look at Russ White in the networking space, and we're like, oh my goodness, guy came up with the CCD. He had his team, the architect, and he's not working for all these different things. He has countless of books. Like, then you can slowly, as you get up, to compare yourself to people like that. But until you do, emulate them. What helped them get there? How did they get there? What made them what made them? And what you find many times, and this kind of bleeds into it, what really makes a good engineer, somebody that people want to hire, is they develop the other side of them. It's not just technical. You want to be good at an engineer role? Guess what? You still will learn how to communicate. You will learn how to be a team player. You will learn how to write, how to speak, how to lead teams, how to work with customers. And as a matter of fact, just to kind of answer a little bit what was said earlier, for anyone, regardless if you're a cashier, if you're tech support, if you have your own business, it doesn't matter if you're an engineer. If you're dealing with people, you're in sales. Get some sales training. Learn what it means to represent your company and sell the idea of what it means to be a partner with your company. So just a few things, but just keep that in mind. It's not all binary, 0 and 1, like the tech likes to
not at all
make you believe. It's an accumulation of many different facets that make you grow as a person over time. And believe it or not, techs are important. But what really sets you apart from wanting to be hired is the person that you are. People will hire somebody with less technical skills as long as they know they can work with them. They're not going to bring the team down. They are capable of learning. They are willing to learn. They're willing to put that work in. And they'll hire people like that. As a matter of fact, I love working with people like that are curious, that have questions, that want to advance. They don't want to just sit on the morals on something that they've done yesterday, but they want to do better. So those are the type of people you want out there. You don't have to meet every single criteria that's on a job application, because half the times the people that write them, Mike knows this well, half the times they write them, they don't know right on there. I was actually looking at one today, Mike, just so everybody understands this too. This was for a NOC position, so network operation position for security and for networking. So I was looking at it just to kind of get an idea what they were asking. And I started reading. They were asking for a certified cloud security professional. They were asking for a cloud security, not cloud security, a certified CCSP. I always forgot what it stands for, but a CCSP. But when you read the actual job description, they want you to create an Active Directory through Microsoft. They want you to be able to run Terraform. They want you to be able to understand the different managed service provider type of software they're using. And I'm sitting there. Why on God's green earth do you include certifications such as the cloud security professional as well as the cloud security professional, the certified security professional, the CSSP? Those are managerial roles. Those are more towards the latter part of that engineering. Yeah,
not operations.
So when I was reading that, I go like, you guys can post this for the next 10 weeks. The person that has those certifications, that has that top understanding, is not going to work in a NOC role.
No, they won't.
Right. So,
that goes to, Mark, what you're bringing up. I've never seen an accurate job description in my life.
No.
And that's why we've given you a description of the skills for the cloud architect versus the cloud engineer. I've also never had more than 10% of the skills in a job description, and I've never been on an interview where I didn't get a job. Never. And why was that? I did a lot of research to figure out what hiring managers really wanted. And what they were looking for was the right set of skills, plus communication skills, trustworthiness, not lying to them on the interview, having a trustworthy resume. They were looking for people that were energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about the roles. They were looking for people that were emotionally intelligent. They were looking for good team players. They were looking for people that were methodical and didn't make a lot of mistakes. And they were looking for people that went above and beyond. So kind of keep that in the back. So, kind of keep that in the mind of it. All of us can do it. But you've got to have the requisite level of primary functional skills. Now, you don't need everything to be good. And that's why we trim down those skills from the list of what you really need to know from the big thing. But the skills that are related to your job are critical. No, somebody wants to be an architect and they learn DevOps. Is that a benefit to them? No, it's somebody else's job. If an architect learns to code, does that help them? Not really, because it really doesn't teach them how to design a solution to improve business performance. If they told me they learned Arabic, I'd say that's much more beneficial for you than learning to code, because there's a billion people that speak Arabic out there and maybe you'll pick up some new business. Whereas learning to code is speaking in something that the CEOs and the CIOs and CTOs won't help you. Now, if you wanted to be an application architect and focus purely on application designs, then I might say knowing APIs and knowing code would be good. But for a big role like a network architect or a security architect or an AI architect or a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, it's not valuable. And that's the secret. We need the skills for our job. And this nonsense of start at help desk or start at this admin role and go there, it's worthless. And here's why it's worthless. Learning how to do somebody else's job doesn't teach you how to do your job. I mean, seriously, we don't have people that decide to, volunteer. We don't have people that want to be physicians and decide that they're going to go out there and learn how to fly airplanes. We don't have people that want to become lawyers that go out there and jump out of airplanes pretending to be like an airborne division of the military. People that want to be lawyers go to law school. You want to be an architect, don't learn how to be a sysadmin, don't learn how to be an engineer, learn how to be an architect. And all these skills we're talking about are valuable for somebody's career. But if I need to fly an airplane, it doesn't matter to me if you're a great race car driver, because you're going to be in the air, not on a race car track. I have a friend that's a race car driver. He describes it sounds kind of cool to me. I'd never want to do it. It sounds too high risk for me, but he loved it. So there's that. Let's go to the next one. And make sure, Tyrone, we don't miss the LinkedIn one that was been sitting there.
So from the LinkedIn user, what you want is someone who understands the fundamentals of the technology and can use that to perform critical analysis to perform tasks. Challenge is that the younger workforce does not always have that exposure to understand what happens under the, I think there's a follow-up to that.
He said hood. And the key is
under the hood, okay.
They can get it, but they have to go fight for it. So right now I'm working with a very high potential 16-year-old. Already passed the AWS Solutions Architect Professional and a couple of the big things. He's super smart. So I made him build himself his own computer. I helped him spec out the DRAM and why he needed the DRAM, the right level of computer. I actually shipped him a GPU. And I gave him a certain things to do. And why is that? Because now he understands that. Now, he'll take that computer. He's going to do some AI things for me first that I want him to do. And then he's going to smack a hypervisor on that, and he's going to create some virtual machines. And then I'm going to make him do some PCI pass-through to actually stick a GPU directly in a virtual machine. I'll have him do some kind of things, passing network cards into a virtual machine like single root I/O. I'll have him create a whole bunch of machines, have him create a network of routers and switches with EVE-NG, and he's going to have to learn this stuff the hard way like we did 20 years ago. So there's always the ability to do it the hard way. The question is which people are actually willing to do it the hard way, to go to bare tactics, to go get those what the Greeks would call first principles. Start from the basic and work your way up. There's this theory, and I'll tell you why I don't recommend it. There's people that will say to get your fundamentals, get a CompTIA A+, Net+, and Linux+. The problem is when somebody's finished their A+, Net+, and Linux+, then there's not going to be any job opportunities offered them. Because while I think CompTIA certifications are fine, they don't have the brand recognition from the employers that says, I want to hire this. They conjure up help desk or junior level admin roles, which we no longer need anymore because the world of AI, we need more sophisticated. Now, I've told people for 20 years not to do CompTIA certification, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just the brand. What I tell people is for their basic networking, get a CCNA or a CCNP because it's more. I tell them instead of that A+ where they're going to learn PC repair, to go build themselves a computer. Spec out all those parts, put them in, learn what they do. Debug it when it doesn't come up the first time. I tell them to install Linux on it and give themselves shock Linux therapy and go in there and install stuff on Linux and install things from the command line and script stuff and automate just to learn it and understand those basic entry-level Linux things. Then I tell them to smack a hypervisor on it. And now create a bunch of virtual machines and go create firewalls on it. And, even if it's an SSL-based VPN, build some Microsoft Active Directory servers in there and learn how that stuff works. Build yourself like an OpenStack or a Nutanix cloud and learn how cloud computing works the hard way and build that darn thing. And when it comes to Linux certification, skip the Linux Plus and get the Red Hat Certified Engineer. And by that way, by the time those person is done with those fundamentals, they know something and they're actually employable in quite a few different roles. No, I wouldn't necessarily say to everybody to do that. Why? Because if I'm going to be an architect, there's no value in you knowing how to configure Linux. None, because you're not going to do it. Now, you will need to understand what is Linux and how does Linux manage memory and what does the Linux kernel do and why are the drivers where they are and why do they sit at the kernel level and how does the driver talk to the hardware? But, that kind of thing an architect would need to know. Why do I need a swap file? What does that swap file do? What happens if that swap file is being excessively used? That's architect knowledge. Admin knowledge is learning how to configure it. But for people that are brand new and they want to just get that general preparedness, that's what I tell them to do. When I've got someone that doesn't know what they want to do, that's where I tell them how to start. Now, if I know where somebody wants to go, I send them straight to the destination. I never learned Linux. Why? I didn't need it as a network architect. I just didn't. Now, did I go out there for a little fun and have a Red Hat box many years ago to toy in my spare time? Yeah, didn't help me ever with my career, but if you come to my house, you'll see a 10-server OpenStack cloud just for experimentation purposes because I'm a techie and I like to have the fun. But when I go and see my clients as an architect, I can't act like a techie. They'll escort me out by security. I'd be fired, and then my replacement would thank me for the job. I have to go in there as a business executive. Tell them about your business, your goals, your pain points. So that's the kind of thing we can always deal at the hard way. It's what are you willing to do? So I agree with you. Many people don't have that now, but they could. If they were going to train with us, they would get to the fundamentals of everything because people leave us with the ability to get hired, not a certificate they can hang on the wall and do nothing with.
Well, I think that's the distinction too, right? This is my little sales plug is what our program actually does is prepare you for the workforce. A lot of times these certifications, people have this, and I'm really trying to figure out, I think at some point somebody must have said something that was quite untrue, but people have this notion that when you take a certification that you're job ready. And we forget that a job is a organic thing. And what I mean with that is a company is made up of people. People have ideas, visions, things that they want to execute. And those things can change too, depending on if they're deemed successful or not. I mean, look at Google. I've never seen a company get rid of so many products in their life. They came up with them, next thing you know, 2 months later, they're gone. But the idea behind that is that you need to understand that certifications are a tool. You need to figure out which certifications are going to help you to gain or get further towards your goal and eventually plan that out. And something that went not too long ago, I think about a week, I think it might have been last weekend, Mike gave a session on opportunity cost, right? Figure out which is the best things to use, tools, right? If that's certifications, figure out what certification is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. Because you can do them all, but number one, you don't have the money and you won't have the time. And then later on, people, unfortunately, what we see is, right, they always tell you don't judge a book by its cover, but unfortunately, we still do that, right? This first impression. So when they see when you have 20 certifications, and one of them is in networking, the other one is in cloud services, then it's databases, then it's AI, then it's machine learning. Then the next thing somebody decides, you know what, what else is there? With storage, right? So you basically across the entire domain, and they're going to look at them and be like, you know what, that's great. I really want an expert in everything. Well, guess what? You're not an expert though. You know a little bit of everything, but where's your true value there? And unfortunately, while it should be a strength that you have taken the time and the effort to kind of broaden yourself into different technologies, and let's say you even have come to the point as to why and how you would use it, what it really depicts to people or illustrates to them is that you're wishy-washy. You really don't know what you want to do. And that might not be the case. This is just how you decided to train yourself. But again, the perception of what you want to put out there to be able to attract the recruiter, be able to have a constructive conversation when you get on that interview. That's the important part. You can do all that, but don't advertise it perhaps. And prioritize what will get you the job that you want. Because remember, we all have one life at the moment, if that's what you believe in. We have a finite amount of time. We have people that we love, people that we want to take care of. And if you want to make a difference in people's lives, there's always that opportunity too. You can marry all of them at the same time, but remember, you have a finite amount of time. You need the right training, and you need to have the right disposition to want to continue. It's going to take discipline. It's going to take sacrifice. Nothing great was built from nothing, and nothing great ever came about by not doing anything for it. As you heard Mike, as you heard me, we all made sacrifices to be able to gain knowledge, to be able to get to the place in a lot of life that we are. It's just the reality of things. This might mean sacrificing the ability to, I'm not a mechanic. I don't know how to fix a car. I can do simple things. Mike gave his example of necessarily interior designing is not his strength. So we all gave up a few things here to be able to accomplish our overall goals. So just keep that in mind.
That's the key. I have like cabinets and they get loose. I have to call my friend Ted. Ted is an expert with tools and mechanical things. I don't know how to do any of it because 100% of my life has either been focused on medicine, fitness, or architecture. And let's talk. Mark brought it up, so let's talk about opportunity cost. And this is going to be really one of the secrets for your success. What if I told you that, and you can go to salary.com and verify it, that the average person with strong business acumen skills earns over $550,000 per year? And once you reach about $150,000 to $180,000, certifications won't increase your salary at all. Where do you spend your time? On the thing that's worth the next $350,000, on the thing that's you've already exceeded, because you can only spend it in one place. Now, here's the thing. Imagine you needed surgery, because I want you to think like the employer. Imagine you needed surgery and you needed a rare surgery. If you walked into the surgeon's office and it said airline pilot, attorney, cloud architect, enterprise architect, security architect, dog walker, and all of that. And then that was surgeon 1. Surgeon 2 went to Oxford University and had a bachelor's degree in chemistry, a bachelor's degree in biology, and a bachelor's degree in microbiology. Then they went to, say, University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and they studied medicine there. And then you needed orthopedic surgery, and they went to the University of Pittsburgh, one of the best orthopedic surgery hospitals in the country, and did a residency there. And then they did a post-fellowship at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland. That's the surgeon I'm going to. The person that's dedicated to the life to the surgery, not someone that spread their things. And when I see a resume like that with 50 certifications of 50 different people's careers, I automatically assume that I don't need to interview them because they're going to be so this is going to be their depth of knowledge, nothing. And they're concerned about who they want to be. They're going to quit in 3 months because they don't know who they want to be. I'm probably not even going to interview them. Why is that? Because when it's time for me to interview people, I have no time. Every interview I do is disrupting my work day. So I'm going to try and narrow it down to the people that I think are the closest fit. And here's the reality. I make one job posting, I'm going to get 5,000 applicants. So I'm going to call a recruiter like Christina Marina, and I'm going to say, I need this, and this. You vet them, you find them for me, and I'll give you a commission for doing so. Because I don't have the time. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Tyrone, let's go into whatever's next for Mark and I.
Question from DevOps. I believe it says African. It says, hello, Mike and team. This is, I'm going to take a stab at pronouncing your name, but I think it's either Saya or say something like that, right? CJ? Okay. All right. And it says, and thank you for everything you do. Will you be able to say a graduate from the Go Cloud Architect program will have the required level of experience?
Absolutely. So I can tell you, whether it's Apple hiring students of ours or whatever they do, or Amazon, Microsoft, and Google hiring solutions architects directly out of our training program, or Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers hiring architects straight out of our program, or JP Morgan Chase Bank, or Barclays Bank, or LeaseWeb, or Calian, or MUFG, or PNC Bank. They're all hiring students out of our program. So yes, you'll have the requisite experience to be an architect. Now, CJ, and I know you, we spoke well, you live in Nigeria. I will also tell you this, you will not have the skills to be an engineer because we dedicate our 800 hours plus, or maybe even 1,000 hours total at this point, to making you a great architect. And an architect has nothing to do with DevOps or SysOps or any of these other things. So yes, you will have all the skills you need. And sometimes people like Al Legister actually get hired as senior solutions architect as their first job, not even a regular one. So yes, you will definitely have the skills.
Yeah.
And CJ, it's my expectation you will stay in our program until you're hired, because it's not like we kick you out of the program and say you've been here for 16 weeks. We're the anti-boot camp. We want to change your life. So yeah, no, seriously, you'll have the skills you need if you do the work.
And to add a little bit to that, and again, I'm going to sound biased because it's the truth. And if something is the truth and it's biased and helps people, you should express it. So I'm going to express it this way. Let's say, even if you're in the program, and let's say your background is engineering. Let's say you're even an engineer right now. And for some reason, you're in the program and you decide, you know what? Architecture is nice, but I like tinkering. I like being close to the tech. I want to tell you this. The skills that are not tech related, the presentation skills, the sales skills, the leadership training, the way you communicate with people, that type of skill set that you still learn in a program is going to put you in that single digit engineering rank on how good you're going to be. Because even as an engineer, if you've ever been on the fence even of joining the program, just keep that in mind. Even as an engineer, as you go higher up, your ability to have a presence, to be able to lead people, to be able to articulate the things that need to get done, could be either during the troubleshooting call, how you deal with people, how you deal with your team, how you propose plans to either update a design, change a design, or if you're doing some type of gap analysis, to be able to take that information, to formulate it in a way and present it so that it could be of benefit to the sales architect or engineer, or even you, if you want to be part of that sales program. All these skills are transferable in making you a better engineer, a better architect, and a better person. You could even take these skills and start your own business, because the training is such a breadth to it that it just doesn't make you a good IT professional. It makes you a good businessman or businesswoman. So just keep that in mind. It's more encompassing than simply go pass the test or get it, kind of like a trophy that you did something. This is really skills that can propel you forward in life. But like Alonzo always says, the program works if you work. So you do have to put the time in and the effort. But remember, irregardless of what sphere you are, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be an architect, if you just want business training, and I sincerely mean this because, as Mike knows, with him and I, we had this discussion many times, it's that business training. Try finding it somewhere else where it's going to be as extensive and as comprehensive without you having to read 50 books, without you having to spend $100,000 of your own money to get an MBA, or perhaps trying to sell your employer on paying on the MBA so that you can get that type of training. So I just want to put out there because it's quite important. This is also what sets us apart from many of the other training vendors, is this idea that we are really trying to improve you as a person than just as a technologist.
Yeah, and the reason we do this is as follows. First, it cost me about $300,000 to get the education that I needed to become that kind of architect at the level I was. Thankfully, I got my company to pay for a lot of it. I had gotten a scholarship when I was younger, but I still paid well over $100,000 and then some to get an education. Much more than that, actually. And if you're going to advise clients on a solution to their business and you don't know business, you're most likely going to hurt them. So 70% of architectures actually hurt their clients. 70%, meaning they provide no business value, but they suck up the company's money that actually purchased it. So I have to teach that, because in order to be an effective architect, you need to understand business, you need to understand finance, you need to understand business processes, you need to know how to sell, you need to know how to lead, you need to know how to communicate and how to present. And those skills, whether you're a physician and you want to become the medical director, there's that. Whether you're the engineer and you want to become a distinguished engineer, whether you're the architect or whether you want to become an architect, or whether you want to be a management and strategy consultant, they're the same set of skills. And I know most people don't have that, $200,000 to $300,000 to learn them. And quite frankly, this is my life's work. Learning how to coach, learning how to lead, and I love doing what we do, and I love getting people hired. So that's why we give these skills to everybody, because without them, you only go so far. And I hate glass ceilings. I hate ceilings where there's that. I had a manager that gave me a very good piece of advice. It's about 20 some years ago. Actually, a little more than 20 years ago. And he said, Mike, to know the difference between that technical solution architect, sales engineering character that you actually are and a $300,000 enterprise architect. And I was like, tell me. He said, stop chasing certifications. You already maxed out in your tech. He said, it's your business acumen, it's your leadership skills, it's your sales skills, it's your executive presence, it's your emotional intelligence, it's all of that. So go get those skills and see how far you will. So keep that in the back of your mind. Tyrone, I have the ability to, I know where I don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to answer the rest of the questions that are here, but let's not take any more. Mark, if you can, that would be great. If not, you know your schedule better than I do.
Yep. Yeah, let's go ahead. I want to make sure we get to those questions that people took their time to be here and ask. So a question from DevOps African. Right now, from all the job requirements I've seen, these employers seem to be posting a job description of not just an architect, but also combined with the job function of a cloud engineer.
Yep, that's why I've said I've never seen a job description that's actually real. These job descriptions are so bad that are completely unrelated to what we do that Gartner actually started asking customers, what do you want in a cloud architect? Because they knew these job descriptions were nothing. And here's what the people that hire architects actually had to say, the chief information officers of the companies hiring cloud architects. They said, the three main high-level responsibilities of a cloud architect are leading the cultural change for cloud adoption, developing and coordinating a cloud architecture, and developing a cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process. On a daily basis, we want our architects to help cloud architects to find talent with the necessary skills, assess application software and hardware, creating a cloud broker team, select cloud providers and vet third-party services, oversee governance and mitigate risk, working closely with IT security to monitor privacy and develop incident response procedures, manage budgets and estimate cost, and operate at scale. So, we've seen these ridiculous, honestly, they're almost more of a comedy routine. And my buddies and I used to get together over WebEx because a lot of us were from Cisco. We would drink some Macallan 25. It's a beautiful scotch. It's I bought those bottles years ago when they weren't $2,000. They were $300. So, I still had some. And, my friends were, they don't care what it costs to buy stuff. So they would buy those bottles and we would sip our scotch and literally make jokes out of these job descriptions. Where you're at in Nigeria, if you're dealing with small businesses, and you've got big businesses in Nigeria too, and incredible amounts of natural resources in Nigeria as well. But if you're architecting things for a small business of less than 5 people, and they typically don't have cloud architects, sure, you can do the design and the engineering. But the majority of companies that are willing to pay $200,000 or more to get a cloud architect are companies with 100,000 people. And it will take you and a team of 15 to 50 people 6 to 12 months to truly understand the business needs, to be able to lead that team to design it. And then when it's going to be implementation time, it's going to take another 50 people or so to do it over the next 6 to 9 months, and you won't be there. You'll be designing your next client's architecture.
Yeah, I'm going to give a practical example too. In one of my roles, I was always, and I say always because it was 9 out of 10 times, called in to do post-mortem incident analysis. Now, would that strike you as a design task? Would that strike you as an architect task? Pre-sales, post-sales, anything like that? It wouldn't. So what does that tell you? Is that you will be wearing many hats. Sometimes you will be wearing them. I'm sorry?
But you were more of a sales engineer there.
Yeah. So, but you still get called in because you have skill set. And what happens after a while, people learn who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, strength, weaknesses. and they learn that they can depend on you. So just because you're in a role that predominantly is not always technical, there are people that even carry the architect title that are at the highest level of escalation, not necessarily because they're going to be able to configure BGP. They're going to be able to configure and implement a database. It's not because of that. It's because, number one, you have the ability to ask effective questions to get to a point. So that's going to be critical, right? We're talking about these soft skills, Nagan. You're going to be good at that to be able to get to the point. You're going to be detail-orientated in the sense that you can drive towards a purpose. So in my case, it was, I needed to gather information from people. That included to build a rapport, have a friendly conversation without sounding like I'm interrogating them. Being able to translate from a security domain to a networking domain, from a networking domain to a business domain. That's a skill in itself. And then being able to package that together by understanding how would you write your report? How would you communicate on your report? And then, believe it or not, many times what you find during a report is you do a form of a gap analysis. You try to find out what was the root of the problem. And many times they will actually come back full circle, because now you may have to actually propose a update to the design so that the same problem won't happen, right? So, but it wasn't that you were the engineer or the technical subject matter expert at that point, but it was the entire package that you had, and that's why they would get you. So don't get hung up too much on titles. Go ahead, Mike.
And that's a good point. So I've worked with architectures and big clients that are spending billions of dollars a year. And they have a big outage, and the technical support team are going to figure that out. And I might go in for the following reasons. I've got a relationship with that client's executives, so I can go in there. I can talk to the client executives to truly understand how it's impacting their business. Then I can go back to my company and I can raise it to the level of the CEO I need and say, this is causing a $30 million financial impact to this customer. This is a reference account. I need to escalate this. I need to bring in 10 additional troubleshooting people that have this level of sophistication. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to be on site every day. I'm going to be buying lunches and dinners and drinks. I'm going to be the psychological counselor for all those engineers that are here. And by the way, I've got a good background in medicine, so I can do what's necessary. I'm going to be the relationship guy. I'm going to be the schmoozer guy. And guess what? We'll probably get something else out of this. So yeah, as an architect, that is my limitation to troubleshooting. But I will go in there and ask questions and hopefully and potentially propose a new architecture that needs to occur. But when you're in that executive architect level, you have deep relationships. And I can go in there and I can call one of those VPs of engineering and say, look, we may need some new code on these switches, even if it's a custom build. I need this many resources with this much skill to get it done. Can you do it for me? And if they say no, I'll go straight to the CEO and get them to do it. So there is that, but it's not because we're going to go hands-on and fix stuff. It's our ability to ask questions, our ability to leave. It is our relationships. And it's about making the client happy at the end of the day and making them satisfied. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I can't even count how many times I've been on calls where I wasn't there to do the troubleshooting. No. But the customer had a relationship with me. They felt comfortable with me. In a time where they felt despair, a time where they felt confused, they tried to latch on to something that's going to give them some type of stability, something that makes them feel confident in what is about to transpire. So many times you're not sitting there, you're not fixing it, you're not making the configuration, but you're guiding them. You're guiding the tech, you're guiding the other parties. You might be guiding vendors, right? This vendor relationship that we talked so many times about. So there's aspects of it that you will have to employ.
Yes.
And guess what? You're going to have super smart engineers with you anyway. People that spend a lot of time digging deep into the tech. And all you got to do is make sure that they feel confident in what they do. You're going to prop them up. You're going to do translation from the technical to the non-technical to help the customer also to feel comfortable with the processes. You won't believe how many times the way you just simply dispel this anxiety that customers had is to explain to them step by step what is about to transpire. Basically, you're laying out a plan of action. That's all it takes sometimes for customers to be like, okay, I get it. This is what we want to do. I hope we get to a solution. Even if you can't get to a solution, because it's a reality, sometimes you just can't get to the root immediately. You could be there to help the customer feel like comfortable with the idea that we're going to do something temporarily. While it's not fixing the overall problem, this is what's going to get your business up and running at this moment. Yep. And then basically comes back to customer experience or customer satisfaction. That's really where your job comes in making the customer feel whole, comfortable with the idea, and you're schmoozing. That's really what it comes down to. You may have to do those calls on the weekend just to see how the customer is doing, how they're feeling with it, do you have any questions. So that's going to be part of your job. Get used to making people feel comfortable.
That's a lot of the job. Tyrell, let's go to the next one. We'll finish up, or the next few.
From, Mr. Moses, nice to see you. He asks, when you get hired in a cloud architect role, how do you stand out in the first few months?
Now, Moses, this is a great thing to think about. One is in the first few months, you're probably not going to stand out. And here's the reason. If you get hired at a post-sales company, it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to figure out what their systems are and who they have and how their business processes are. If you're in a new company, I'll tell you what I did in my last architect role. And here's what I did. On the first day, I went to the office and I met people. And you know what I did? I started talking to people. Now, I lived 2.5 hours away from the office. And I, literally speaking, went to the office every day for the first 6 weeks. Each day, I took a different person out to lunch with my company credit card. And my manager was supportive of it. I went and I got to know the people. I got to know the consulting architects, the distinguished engineers, the consulting engineers, the sales engineers. When the executives would come in from San Jose, California, I'd try to find a way to talk to them. And I spent my first, 6 weeks literally meeting people. Now, I'd asked my manager, and I had a great manager. It was Cisco, and Cisco had some of the best people in management I've ever seen in tech. And I said to him, what can I do? Where can I get started? And he said, Mike, what you're doing is right. He said, I see what you're doing, Mike. He said, you're building relationships, and you understand that your value is a person that can lead the team, not do the work. And he said, that's really good because we're going to be working on $1 billion deals here, and you're not going to be able to do it all yourself. My manager then said, I have no expectations for you for the next 6 months. So keep doing what you're doing. Now, the next day, my manager said, hey, Mike, guess what? An RFP for the most critical voice architecture in our company's history is here right now, and you're the lead architect. And I said to my manager, I said, you do know that I don't know voice at all, right? But I know video, I know BGP, I know MPLS. He's like, voice, video, same thing. I'm like, not really. One's multicast, one's unicast, one's based upon these protocols, one's based on something else. I'm like, it's kind of completely different. And here's what my manager said to you. He said, Michael, he said, what have you been doing for the last 6 weeks? I said, developing the relationship so I can build and lead the team that I need to. And he said, guess what? Go do it. This is your project. Now, here's the good news. I invested hard in those first 6 months or 6 weeks. I got to learn everybody. Now I was given this project. What's the first thing I did? I created my team. Now, when you form a team, there's this concept of forming, norming, storming, and performing. Performing, so the first thing I did is I took everybody out to lunch and drinks that night. I got everybody drunk, except for the people that had to drive home. I made sure they all had a good time. I said, we'll get together tomorrow at 10 a.m. I realized there's this. They all had a great time. We get together at 10 a.m. I had a wonderful breakfast brought in for everyone. And I said, okay, here's the situation we have here. Now, I picked you, this team, for this specific reason. You were recommended for this. You were recommended for this. You guys know each other? Nope. So some knew each other, some didn't. So I created some kind of team building game experience to get them all on the same page. That shortened the time necessary to get to work. And you know what I did that night? I took them again for steak and lobster and fancy silver oak wine and good scotch. The next day, we were ready to get to work. We all went to the client site. I divided the people into doing all these other things. They took their information. They created an architecture. We responded to RFPs. I led them. Each day, I walked around to everybody or spoke to them. Are you okay? How are you doing? How are you holding up? What do you need from me? People would say, I need my manager to leave me alone on the other projects. I'd go talk to their manager, give them the scale of this, and it was good. Now it was time for a proof of concept. And guess what? The same thing. I had my same team. Now I got told, Mike, just to let you know, the director of solution architecture is going to be coming down to watch you work. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be a rough day for me. So director comes down, somebody I never met. But on the business side, the sales side, they were VPs. And because engineering engineering in those days was one step below sales, they were always directors, but it was the equivalent of a VP. So that person comes down, and it's like 11:30, 11:45 in the morning. And I said, Terry, I think it's time to take everybody out to lunch, to listen to what they have to say, to diffuse them. I said, truth be told, they do it every day. And I said, Terry, if you're willing to hang out, around 5 o'clock, I take everybody for a cocktail hour. I defuse. I do a post-mortem to see what worked, what didn't work, what they need. Well, I take them all to lunch. I take them to drinks. And he pulls me aside. And he says, Mike, your leadership skills are absolutely incredible. He says, not only to know that you're going to close that deal, you were going to go very far and very fast in this company. And I was worried that he was going to complain that I wasn't touching the tech. But no, he didn't want me to do that. So there was that. RFP comes out. We win the deal. Now the same people that helped design it helped me pick out the team of the people that were going to build it. And then it was time to be built. I brought in a director level person from the post-sales department, brought in the new team, kicked off the new team, did transition calls, and then I went to my next project, like all architects do. So there's that. So what do? You go out there and meet people. You go out there and you talk. When there's opportunities to volunteer for projects, you take them. When there's opportunities for you to train certain people on skills that you know that they don't know, you take it. You give as much as you can. You pour your heart and soul into it. And you show everybody why they need you. That's the secret.
I wholeheartedly agree. There's nothing I could add to that to make that any better, Mike. That was perfect.
Let's bring on the next one.
So from DevOps, African. Also, if we build personal projects, will this help sharpen our skills and increase our employability?
CJ, if you do the right projects, yes. If you do the wrong projects, no. So I want you to think about this. You're applying for Delta Airlines or Olympic Airlines, or I don't know if Olympic Airlines still exists, or American Airlines, or any airline to be an airplane pilot. And now you go out there and show that you know how to fix an engine. Does that make anybody see you as the airplane pilot? No. It shows everybody that you're the airplane mechanic. So if I'm an architect and somebody shows me that they know how to set up a website or configure an EC2 instance or configure an AWS database, they just showed me not to hire them because they now know the skills for somebody else's job, not as an architect. So no, it makes you less employable than me, and it makes me think you're the hands-on techie. Now, here's the difference. If you create thought leadership document on how some new technology can shape the XYZ industry, now you're doing architecture work. If you create responses to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, yeah, you're doing architecture work. If you create a reference architecture for a certain industry, you're doing architecture work. If you go out there and speak at a conference or presentation, you're doing architecture work. So showing people that you've got the skills to doing your job, the equivalent of project, is awesome. But showing me that you can do somebody else's job just convinces me not to hire you for the job you want. They'll potentially consider you for the job that's somebody else's job. Now, I still, when I train people, have people do hands-on. And why? I don't want them to advertise it. And I tell my students, don't talk about this. But, I have people build an OpenStack cloud from scratch, and here's why. When we understand what employers are looking for, they're looking for energy, enthusiasm, passion, competency, willing to go above and beyond, a good team player, and excitement for the role. Person A goes to AWS and sets up an S3 bucket. Okay. Person B builds a cloud. Who learned more? Who has more energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the role? Who's more likely going to be competent? And who's willing to go above and beyond? Now, I still would have you get hands-on, but I would say do it for you. And that way, if anybody's ever asked you, have you done it? You can say the answer is yes. But if I want to sell candy bars, I'm not going to create an advertisement for broccoli. I love broccoli and I eat a pound of broccoli each day and I don't eat candy bars. But if I was trying to sell sugar, I'm not going to show broccoli. It's going to be the wrong message. If I wanted to show people that I was an airplane pilot, I'm not going to show them skydiving because it's a different skill. So the projects, the work, everything you have to do has to be in the career you want. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. Today, if I went out there and I talked about beta blockers and ACE inhibitors and how they can improve healthcare outcomes in people in congestive heart failure, would you see me as a cloud architect? If I went in there and talked about performing lumbar sympathetic block with patients that have chronic regional pain syndrome, would you see me as a cloud architect? Probably not. And you might think me as a pain specialist and an RSD, CRPS specialist, but you wouldn't see it. And if you go out there and do engineering stuff and show off your engineering projects, I'm going to see that you're not an architect, that you're an engineer. And
go ahead, please.
And I want to add one more thing. Is it going to sharpen your skills? So here's the thing. Let's say you go set up an S3 bucket. Is that going to tell me that you understand object storage and you understand why object storage is write once, read many times? Is that going to teach me that you understand why I can't use object storage as persistent storage in a virtual machine? Is that going to tell me you understand the performance considerations in object storage and the use cases of object storage? No, it's going to teach me nothing. It's going to teach you how to configure object storage. Same thing with your PC. You use it every day, right, CJ? Tell me about the CPU in your PC. Tell me about the amount of level 1, level 2, and level 3 cache and what they do. Tell me about how the core-to-core communication, what you have. Tell me the number of PCIe lanes and how that impacts the number of GPUs you can use in the machine learning environment. Tell me how that CPU feeds, gets its information out of DRAM. Tell me how that CPU and its PCIe bus affects the NVMe storage that you may be using versus SATA SSD storage versus SATA magnetic storage versus SAS storage. But you're using it because using something does not teach you. That's why the people that build bridges don't get hired to design bridges. That's why the people that build houses don't get asked to be the architect of the next hotel or the next skyscraper, because it is a different skill on how to build than how to design.
Correct. I was just going to add to that. It's your intent. What is building going to sharpen? If you do it, let's say, with the intent that you want to be a bit more competent in how you communicate with, let's say, engineers, then perhaps if you tailor your building around that concept, around that intent, it might help you. But aside from that, and this is just a word of caution, when we tend to build something, the first thing we have to focus on is how to use the tools to build it. So in this case is depending, let's say we go with networking, what type of network operating system I'm using. The way I built in a Cisco IS is going to be different the way I built in JunoOS or the way I'm going to build in ExtremeOS. It's just going to be a little bit different, right? So the first thing that's going to happen there is my initial intent was, hey, I want to sharpen my skills by learning a little bit more how BGP works so that I can talk to people, engineers that do BGP traffic engineering. But the first thing you're going to do is try to learn the commands because you got to build it first. And that's going to drive you a bit away from the intent that you originally had. So if you're going to be building, make sure that you're building for the right reason and that you're sharpening the right skills. For example, if you're building and at the same time you're thinking, how would I apply this in a real project, a real use case scenario? If somebody was to ask me something about this particular technology, would I be able to communicate to them without using acronyms and additional technical details what this technology is that I'm using? Then perhaps building it and clarifying it in your mind might be of use. But I always caution, if you don't know how the tool actually already works so that you can use it to build something, you're going to spend a lot of time learning the tool first before you ever can get to building something. Basically, you got to learn to use the hammer before you can use the hammer to drive a nail into a wall or into a stud or something else. Right. And question from Mr. Mohammed. To get the job, how do you balance between technical and soft skills or during work with others?
Well, you display your soft skills at all times, and you have to develop the competency in your actual thing. So I don't completely understand the question. I wish I did. But, in every interaction I have, I try to treat people in a manner that's fair, decent, ethical, and honorable. Because at the end of the day, the only thing people remember is how you treat somebody. Do I occasionally give people something unreasonable to do? Sure. About a month ago, I asked Mark to create about 100 networking videos in 2 weeks. Was it a reasonable thing? Not one bit. Did Mark understand the reason, the rationale, and why it was so critical? Sure. And that way he didn't hate me for it, because we knew we needed it for a specific thing, and he was fine with it. So there's time in a business where you got a fire that needs to be put out. But how do you treat that person? Do you care about that person? Do they know you care about that person? Do you know they have their best interest at heart? Do they know that if they needed something for you, you would go above and beyond to help them? Do they know you really care? If the answer is yes, you're doing your job, and you're getting them to their goal. At the end of the day, sometimes it's just as easy to be nice as it is to be nasty. I mean, I have to think hard if I want to be nasty. It's not my nature. But it takes the same amount of effort to treat somebody well. Losing your head and losing your cool and getting mad at someone may give you 30 seconds of comfort. But how many hours are you going to feel bad about it after the fact? So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That's how I always balance it.
Yeah, I don't have I would say 100% answer for you, Mohammed. But what I would say is, number one, be aware of it. If you're aware of something, then what's going to happen is, as you engage in the different activities, it's going to allow you to compensate perhaps in ways where you find yourself being off balance. I found that there's always a technical discussion and then a non-technical discussion. And you will find this either let's go across the entire spectrum. It could either be when you're initially talking to a customer, trying to understand what their business requirements are. So let's talk about this a little bit more, your soft skills. But at the same time, you're already in your head trying to figure out, how do I take those business requirements, which we consider high level, and how do I turn them into, number one, what we call functional requirements? So those are going to be a little bit more detailed and going to involve the technology more, because you're trying to figure out features, services, things like that. So in your mind, you're going to play that game, but you're going to translate that to the customer and then have to retranslate it to something that you can use so that you can pass it on to the engineer. Or let's say if you're the engineer, you also need to make sense of it from your perspective. Because the way a soft skill or this non-technical information comes to you, it looks different once the technology gets implemented, right? Somebody can say that I want to be able to utilize one of my links towards service provider A more than towards service provider B. Well, that's what they're telling you. How do you translate that into BGP terms if you're appearing with the service provider? How do you take that business requirement now and turn it into a functional requirement, and then eventually provide the technical requirement down to be able to do that configuration, right? Because that configuration is going to look a whole lot different than what the customer just said.
Yeah.
So in either case, you have to be, first of all, aware of it, and then go from there.
Can we go to the next one?
All right, from Emmanuel, it says, is it possible to land a job as an enterprise architect with no experience, but have the academic qualifications?
So, Emmanuel, I've had plenty of clients get their first enterprise architect job from another job. Now, are you saying that you're 20 years old and you just graduated college, or 22 years old and you have no work experience with any job? Because if the answer to that is no, it's probably going to be rough. But, if you've had another job, I've had plenty of people. As far as I remember, you're working on an MBA at Widener University, which is a great school. I did an MBA there as well. So that's going to definitely help you. I haven't seen you in class, but if you came to class and started doing the work, you would have all these enterprise architect skills to be pretty good. And maybe your first job is as a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, but you've got good qualifications. You just need to be prepared for the job. And even if your first job was a solutions architect or a cloud architect, and you took an enterprise architect role a couple years later, you'd still be fine. But yes, it's absolutely possible. I mean, Jermaine did it. Wallace Agana did it. And they never worked in tech before. Their first tech job was an enterprise architect. So yeah, it can be done. Al took a senior solutions architect job at what do you call it? At Deloitte. And to be fair, when you're at Deloitte, you're kind of doing, and no matter what role you're in, you're doing more enterprise architect stuff anyway, because they're a strategy consulting company and they focus on strategy, which is all enterprise architecture. Everyone, we go to the next one.
From Foolish to Crow, what is the ideal to acquire sales experience in the context of tech or cloud architecture? Yes, I do tech support.
Okay, so there's a big difference between experience and competency. I don't care at all about your level of experience. I care about your competency. I have two people foolish to crow. I've got person one, PhD in cybersecurity, 20 years in cybersecurity, a CISSP, a CISM, and a CCSP. I got a 14-year-old that just hacked into the system designed by that PhD with all the fancy certifications and 20 years experience. What do? I fire the PhD with all those years of experience. I hire that 14-year-old and I hire a new architect, because if my architect, despite having all the best experience, was defeated by a 14-year-old, he or she is not that good. Now the 14-year-old has some level of ability to do some research and to be able to learn and know what to do. That's the kind of person I hire. Nothing to do with your experience, everything you have to do with your capability. So take a course like ours or get sales training. Don't get me wrong, I've taken $20,000 plus of sales training in my life because I knew that sales training could add another $300,000-$400,000 to my annual salary. And was $20,000 a lot to spend for that? No, it's nothing. I mean, it's literally nothing. I could have paid it back, which I did in one month of working with better sales skills. But you have to invest in yourself. It's competency. So if you were one of our students, you'd be designing architectures, for example. And you know what you'd be doing when you're done designing the architectures? You'd have to present it back to our C-suite. All business executives with MBAs, except for one of us. And that person that doesn't have the MBA is probably the most technically competent of the bunch. They'd present to our executive team, which is a chief operating officer, a chief marketing officer, a CEO, and a chief technology officer. And they'd have to prove to us that their solutions are right for our business. That's what you do it. You design it, you present it, and sell it. That's the job. So practice selling things. Try to sell your wife into something that you want, or your husband or boyfriend, girlfriend. I don't care, whatever the situation is. I don't want to make any assumptions in today's world. Try to convince your cat to do something, by the way. Kind of keep this in the back of your mind. Kind of keep. So go out there and do it and practice on it and try to change people's minds. If you have a job, try to convince your manager about something that's going to make the department better. Go out there and learn to sell. And if you're not good at it, it's not your nature, get some training. Training is the great equalizer. It's how you can go, like my wife was born in another country. She didn't learn English until she was 5 years old. But I'll tell you, there's nobody better in cardiology that I've ever met than my wife. Why? Because she dedicated her life to it, and she went to school, and she got the right education. And as soon as she graduated school, do you know what she did? She bought every book she could possibly find, and she read them from cover to cover. She dragged me all across the country for medical education events on the certain thing. I walk in her office, and I'm blown away. I'm like, because I remember meeting her when we were just college students. And now I see her. And honestly, I expect her to practice medicine in Greek because that's what we speak at home. I expect her to practice medicine in English. One day I walked in her office and she was asking her patients on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does this hurt in Spanish? And I said, when did you learn Spanish? And she said, I spent the last 2 weeks learning Spanish because my translators couldn't understand my thoughts. So when we were on vacation, every time you were in the ocean, I was learning Spanish. So it's that kind of thing. But you can do anything you want. It's not experience. Yeah. It's competency or the ability to do it and do it well.
And just remember this too. You mentioned tech support. What do you have to do in tech support? You got to be analyze a problem, find a solution for that. You know how many? Even I, when I was doing some more tech support, I had to figure out a way. How do I sell the customer on this? That this is really going to work. So this idea of sales is really everywhere. Sometimes we just attach a different type of name to it. Sometimes we call it, I got to convince you. Other times we call it influence. But in the end, if you're trying to impact or influence a particular outcome, you're going to have to sell the person as to why this will work. And I'm going to tell you, this goes from the bottom up if you want to consider it all the way to the top. There's always going to be somebody who you have to convince that something that you want to do, something that you have, is going to meet a particular need that they have. And in the end, if you want to attach the word sales to it, you can, because that's in the end what you're doing. And in tech support, believe it or not, you can do that on every single phone call, and you can do it on every single tech ticket that you have. You can actually always take the perspective of, how am I going to convince the customer that this, what I just found for them, and by the way, you have to convince yourself first too, so you have to sell yourself first that it's going to work, and then sell the customer on the idea that this works for you. And then, like Mike mentioned, the experience really comes in when you apply particular training. So you're going to still need training and knowing how to sell. Now, there's going to be always foundations into selling, but different products get sold just slightly different, right? The way you would sell a high-ticket item is going to be done differently than you're going to sell a $10 course, for example, right? So just keep that in mind. But the key is get training so that you can improve your competency on it, and then take advantage of the different, what's the word I'm looking for? Circumstances that come about and that you can practice it. Because in the position that you're in right now, the worst thing that could happen is that the solution that you found and that you potentially sold the person on doesn't work. That's a lot cheaper of a lesson to learn than when you get into eventually architecture and you're selling these multi-million-dollar solutions and they go a bust. And Mike knows this very well, because we have these discussions on how many cloud architectures actually fail, but they were sold well.
Yeah.
And from the coder from above, how much time did it take you, Mike, to have these leadership skills? I am so introverted, it will take a full conversation from my side to have that.
Okay, so let's be fair, the coder from above. I was the most shy, introverted person you've ever met. So I'm married 28 years from now. And, you know, when I was younger, I was working on ambulances. And I met my wife in school. And she had asked me to walk her to her car because it was an environment where, you know, being walked to your car kind of helped from a safety perspective. I knew I had a chance to talk to her, okay? But I knew nothing about how to talk to people. Because I was young and in school. At the time, I was working as a firefighter paramedic, one more paramedic, and I had just bought this fancy knife that was really good at cutting seatbelts off of cars, could break windshields because it had a titanium point on it. And I was a Filipino martial artist, a Taekwondo person, a Shotokan person, a Krav Maga person, and knives and swords were something that were part of martial arts. And when I'm walking her to her car, I still didn't know what to talk about. I started talking to her about the fancy knife that I saved up for 3 months to go buy. And she looked at me like I had 4 heads, because that's how introverted I was. Now, when I saw the expression on her face, I went, I guess I just blew my shot. And then I finally said this, and I don't even know how I said it. I said, look, I'm sorry, Lisa. I said, truth is, you're beautiful and you terrify me because you're so beautiful. I said, I really don't know what to say, but I think you're pretty spectacular. So I'm sorry if this is coming across wrong. Well, within 6 months, we were engaged. The key was I was very, very shy, had no idea how to talk to people. And truth be told, if I wasn't a martial arts expert, I was the kid they would have shoved in the locker going through school because I was so shy and so gentle. In fact, they tried, but I was a martial arts expert, and they learned very quickly, don't try to kill Mike. It's not going to work out well for you. And then I had peace. As the Latin word parabellum says, if you want peace, prepare for war. And that's what I had to learn as a child to be safe and secure, because I'm so gentle and so shy. And that was not exactly great for high school where I went to school, or junior high school. I will tell you that when I learned internal medicine, I learned how to talk to people. I will tell you when I was done that, I took leadership training after leadership training after leadership training, and a total of about $300,000 of education. And then I was really good at what I did. I'll tell you, it takes about 6 months to a year of proper training and good focused practice to be able to develop these skills. You wouldn't know I'm an introvert now. You'd have no idea. The only way you would know is my old manager, who's a VP over at NVIDIA now, Alvin DaCosta. He did a podcast or a web show with us one day. And he said to our audience, Mike's an introvert, right? And they were like, huh? And they're like, he's the guy that if he had the chance would sit in the corner, have a glass of wine, wait for the event to be over. But he's learned how to go out there and do it. So it just takes time. You got to get the right training and you'll be good, the coder from above. Let's just for the sake of time, we'll go to the next one because I know that I'm going to make sure we finish by 5. I don't want to keep Mark too late.
All right, from John. He asks, as a cloud security architect, what certification would you recommend? For example, CCSP or CISSP?
For a cloud security architect, these are my 3 recommendations for certifications. And again, they're not going to teach you the job. 1, cloud professional certification, because you need to know the cloud. So that would be Azure Solutions Architect Expert, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. You will learn nothing about architecture in these things, but it shows that you have some competency or some knowledge in the cloud. The next thing that I would say is the CISSP. The CCSP, look, it's far deeper than an AWS security advanced certification or whatever they call it, but that has 0 security in it. In fact, I actually made a whole course for it, and I sent it to Mark to evaluate. And Mark said, we shouldn't even embarrass ourselves by teaching this. There's no security in it. So the CCSP is a better version of the AWS security certification that's about 3 times deeper. Having said that, it's nowhere close to what you need to know as an architect. So I would use the CCSP as a replacement for the Security Plus to get really junior with those cloud security fundamentals. And what I will tell you about the CCSP, which I like, it actually has more cloud knowledge on it than you would get actually out of the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. They'll teach you more in that basic intro one, but employers won't realize that, so I'd say get the cloud provider one. The security certification is hands down the CISSP, and even if you don't have 5 years, it doesn't matter. Do that. You'll actually learn something in the process, and you'll just put CISSP-associate. And when you tell the employer that you passed the certification that it makes 5 years of experience to attest the exam and you've got none, they'll think you're much smarter and more motivated. So again, it's going to make you stick out longer. And really, 70% of architectures are complete and utter disasters. They actually hurt the company that builds them. So I'd probably get a TOGAF certification. Why? Because that shows you understand architectural frameworks, like where do you start with the client, where do you end for transformation. So they're the 3 that I recommend for security architect people. I can tell you very recently I had a TV host from Africa who recently got his first job in tech as a cloud security architect. I'm sorry. He applied to be a cloud security admin, but they told him it was too junior for him. So then he applied to be a cloud security architect, and they said that was too junior for him. And then he took a security architect role in the CISO's office for a very big organization. So kind of keep that in your mind. That's what I would do. But they're the 3 that I would actually recommend in today's world. Mark's shaking his head yes, we'll just move on.
There's much I can say. I mean, like you said, when I saw the previous one and then I saw the actual one from the ISC2, the cloud security one, I just said, this is so much better. It actually does give you confidence in what you're learning. Follow-up question from John. He says, for senior level role as a cloud security architect, when in an interview, regardless of the audience, do I approach questions from the business standpoint before going to tech, even if it's a tech question?
So, John, first, I don't consider a cloud security architect as a senior level role. Many of the people that I train, that is their first actual job in cybersecurity as a cloud security architect. Now, a chief security architect is CISO. That's what I consider a senior role. So there is that, or a chief architect or an enterprise architect. They're more senior roles. Now, if you don't ask the business questions first, you'll never know what problem you're solving. What's the real problem? So from a security perspective, what are you protecting? Which means if you don't know what those organizations' assets are, you don't even know what you're protecting. Maybe the what's that golden retriever for Bush's baked beans that's got the secret recipe that always tries to sell it? Maybe you've got a secret formula for baked beans. Maybe it's a drug company that has the next $10 billion blockbuster drug to solve a cancer problem. That company, their intellectual property is going to be enormously valuable that they're going to have to sell. Pretty more important than a website of my cat Cindy photos. I got the cutest cat Cindy, but let's be fair, that's not a lot of intellectual property. So the first thing is I need to understand what is that business. I need to understand that organizational's assets. I need to understand their cost of downtime. For example, for Amazon, it costs roughly $1 million a minute that they're down. Or is that per second? It's hard to tell. But it could be $1 million a minute. I've got other companies that could be down all year and don't lose $1 million. And that changes my security. I need to understand the business architecture. What's that customer journey like? Who are the supply chain partners? All that stuff's what's going on. Because if I don't understand that, what am I designing? So long before I get to the tech, I have to understand the business needs. And John, that's why I like the TOGAF. Because TOGAF doesn't teach you architecture, but at least it gives you a way of thinking. Starting with what are the business goals? Now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. Because your architecture will have to meet them. Then I need to understand the business processes. Because here's the thing. Now I stick security in there, and guess what happens? I break the business. So I need to understand how does that business need to operate before I can figure out where I'm securing it. Then I need to look at the technology that I have, and will it support the security, the goals, the needs, the future, what we want? If not, then we can get to the design. Now, I can't create the design without understanding that organization's capabilities, meaning, can they even support the design? Do they have the people there? What are the gaps in people that we need to actually do for that? Then I need to create a team of people that are going to design the architecture. But unless I got those business things first and then evaluated the technology, I don't even know where I'm going to begin to design anything. So then after that, now I need to create a governance structure for the people that are going to do this. We need to figure out which vendors we're going to choose to use and how we're going to get the vendors to play nicely. And, I could have an architecture where I could have firewalls from Palo Alto and firewalls from Cisco. I could have an IDS, IPS system from somebody else. I could have a SIEM system from somebody else. I could have data loss prevention systems from somebody else. I could have Microsoft Active Directory being my main IAM system, which is federated into something else. I need to know what that security policy is going to look like, and all that stuff only comes from understanding the business first. So always start with the business. If we don't start with the business, and sadly, a lot of architects don't start with the business, 70% of architectures fail the businesses. So they actually don't help the business. So imagine this. Imagine you paid $1 billion for something, and you had opportunity to invest $1 billion in one thing, or $1 billion to output it in something else. And you put it in the tech, and the tech does nothing for the business. You're not going to be happy. Because that $1 billion invested at 5% interest at least could have returned some yield, or that $1 billion could have been spent on a marketing campaign which could double the sales or triple the sales. So businesses like all of us only have a limited amount of resources. So where they place their resources determines their success or their failure. So if you think about it that way, it always must be the business if you want to make your client successful. So we ran a little late because this was a lively discussion, and I love lively discussions. I had Mark, who could get about as deep as anybody would ever want you to in tech, because I love that, and he provides that side for both architects and engineers. And John, you asked one question. If anything says DevSecOps, it has absolutely nothing to do with security. So I wouldn't even begin to to develop it. DevSecOps is related to coding and merging gaps between operations and software and a little bit of code verification and security checks. And if you're focused on DevSecOps, you know what you're not focused on? The organization's end-to-end security policy, the organization's remote access type of security, the organization's end-to-end encryption, the organization's architecture at all. You are focused on hardcore engineering. So if it said DevSecOps, I probably wouldn't even want to work for that company. But here's the reality. Most of the job descriptions out there are complete and utter garbage, and they're completely meaningless. And if you actually deal with cybersecurity architect roles, they're not coming from a DevSecOps background as a general rule. Many of them come from a networking background, and many of them come from a security background. But generally speaking, the job descriptions are completely 100% meaningless. And that's why CIO magazine had to write that article. And that's why companies hire recruiters. And I'll tell you, I've never had more than 10% of the skills on a job description, and I've never not been hired. And more importantly, that's why I try to always go with a recruiter. Christina Marino placed me in half of the roles that I've ever taken. And honestly, she'd send me a job description and I'd say, Christina, that's not the real job. And she'd say, you're right. But the hiring manager that told me they want this, 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 and this. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to be able to show them that I can do. And that's the benefit of having a good recruiter. That, and you don't get auto rejected for an application where you don't have the skills in 500 different people's careers. So there's that. Rejected by an HR person who has no idea what a cloud security architect is. So generally speaking, I try to start with the hiring manager, and I try to use an external recruiter whenever possible for those reasons. Now, John, I'm not sure if you're the networking guy in the UK, and if you are, awesome. It's always good to see you. You could be a different John O, and I know lots of John O's. I know. So, but if it's you, who I think you are, from Nigeria living in the UK, awesome. You could also be my friend John O, who potentially could have come here, who's from Portugal and has a PhD in physics as well. Really neat guy as well. So if that's you, good to see you here as well. Okay, let me summarize on these three things, or tell me about three things we have for you. On Thursday this week, we're going to have a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. Come and join us. It's completely free. My team will pop that in the chat box. It's also in the description of this video. Please, I had a feeling it was you, John, and I'm thrilled to see you here. I had a feeling you were our student over there in the UK. You're a rock star. Did you ever finish that CCI you were doing too? Because I know you had that good, strong networking background. So join us for the completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar. And while we're at it, there's in the description of this video, my team will put in the chat box all the skills you need to get your first cloud architect job. Again, that's going to be in the chat box. And, you know, we're going to have a free Azure Solutions Architect Expert Bootcamp, and we will go way beyond the kind of stuff that would be in that certification to try and help you. And it's going to be all free. So sign up for it. It's free. We'll have lots of people there. We'll get to talk to each other. It'll be fun. I love training people. It's my life. Mark loves helping people and training people. I know it's what he does. Probably get some of the rest of my team on there, and we'll do anything we can to help you. And it's all going to be free. So please join us. Mark, you have anything you want to close with?
As usual, I am honored and happy that you all could take time out of your day to join us. I know we kind of did a little bit of hybrid of attempting to help you all understand the difference between what we generally see out there when people consider what skills they want to push onto an employer, but also consider what an employer truly needs from you. And that, of course, is going to make you a lot more hireable, employable, as some of you may said. But more importantly, it helps you focus and gain clarity so that you can actually gain the skills and set yourselves apart from everybody out there who tends to do all the wrong things and then complains about it. So I'm really happy that you all could join us. And then hopefully, if we have a Q&A tomorrow, if you have any more questions, we look forward to seeing you there as well.
Absolutely. I forgot. Tomorrow we'll come and answer career questions. I love doing that. So join us tomorrow. Join us for some of these free things. Now I got to go do my YouTube spiel. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to help you in your career.